We will call this special meeting of the school board to order at 7:03 on Thursday, August 15th, 2024. We have a single item agenda this evening, and it's to discuss the possibility of a referendum question in November. So, before we get started, I'm going to do a small read here that we do every time. In accordance with school board policy 167.3, the McFarland School Board welcomes public comment during regular meetings from individuals who are present at the meeting, participating virtually, or have sent an email to the board president or superintendent. Participants are required to register to speak upon arriving at that meeting, provide their name, address, and any group affiliation before speaking, address only topics within the legitimate jurisdiction of the board, recognize that the board will not respond to comments during the meeting unless the item is on the published agenda, limit their comments to under 5 minutes or 600 written words, and as always, maintain decorum. So what we have is some folks in person to do public comment, and then we'll be reading multiple others. So I think we'll start with our in-person folks. Kelly Thompson.
Good evening. My name's Kelly Thompson. I am a McFarland community member, moved here in 2010. I am a homeowner and taxpayer in McFarland as well. I'm also the parent of a 2023 graduate of McFarland High School. She went through the district K-12. And I also am a teacher in the district. I've been teaching in the district for 25 years, 27 years of teaching total. So I think all of those things give me a valuable perspective on the issues that are facing us. I'm actually not really going to address the issue of amount of the referendum or number of years. I was on the referendum engagement committee, and that was an incredibly valuable process. And I think there are very few people that wouldn't agree that our schools need to be appropriately funded. They've been underfunded for many years, and while that is a bigger issue than all of you can resolve quickly, I'm really here to talk about a couple of pieces, and one is the process. I think the second round after the April referendum did not pass was incredibly valuable for me as someone who has been in the district for 25 years. It just was a really diverse cross-section of the community. It was a diverse cross-section of opinions about the referendum and so forth. And I learned a tremendous amount from that process. I would hope that as we continue toward the November election, that there are even more ways to involve more community members in that process. I think one thing that was particularly valuable to me about it was the discussion, and particularly the face-to-face discussion. I think that there is just something lost in trying to debate significant issues online through social media, and I think those face-to-face conversations with fellow McFarland community members was incredibly valuable. I think another really valuable piece was the community sessions that were held. I have gotten feedback, I did speak at one of them, from people in the community about that. I know they were watched online beyond, the people that were able to attend. So I think that the amount of information and the way in which that has been communicated is stellar. I would encourage the community to continue to take advantage of that. Super valuable, I found. I think my concerns for students, as we all are first and foremost concerned about students, is students can't vote. So we, staff, parents, community members have to some degree, be their voice. And in 25 years of teaching, I have found, and I know you all know this, that relationships are key. Relationships are the foundation to a student's education. And stability in relationships is crucial. From students, my own daughter included, who still reaches out to her high school coaches, who got the opportunity to volunteer in one of her middle school teachers' classrooms this year, who has several of her former former teachers sitting in the room right now. Those kinds of things just don't have a dollar value in the value that they bring to a student's experience in the district. My fear is that we will lose that if funding is not there to help retain our staff and our teachers. I think about our district, mission, every learner, every day. In 25 years of teaching, I have watched the needs of students grow, and we have to be able to meet those needs if we are going to meet that goal of meeting every learner's needs every day. On the local news recently, there have been a couple of references to 40% of new teachers in Wisconsin are leaving the profession before their within 6 years. That is incredibly concerning for a number of reasons, but additionally, with fewer people going into the profession, it's even more critical that we retain teachers in McFarland. Supply and demand, the economics of that is what it is. We have to be able to provide a salary that's competitive with other Dane County districts. And it isn't keeping up with the Joneses. I've sort of heard that argument out there. It is simple economics. It's a supply and demand issue, super important. Finally, I would say, I think about all my students over the years, and including the ones that'll be coming back into my classroom, and I want the very best for them. I know you do too. Yep.
To interrupt, can we get that phone turned off?
That's so sorry. I knew that was going to happen. So in the end,
My bad.
in the end, thank you for all of your work. I know this isn't easy, and your work, your effort, your decision-making is very much appreciated. Okay, that's it.
Sorry, Kelly.
No worries. I knew it was going to happen.
Libby Rowley.
She did such a great job. I'll be sticking to my script. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Libby Rowley, and I truly do appreciate your dedicated service to our community school. I began my teaching career here in 1993, and then I returned again in 2014 after spending some time with my children. I chose to come back to McFarland because of the strong sense of community that we have here, especially with the staff. However, I'm worried about our community as it faces these significant challenges. Increased class sizes are leading to less individualized attention for students, and the lack of support in the classroom results in lost instructional time, which in turn contributes to increased student behaviors. While I know that Dr. Hauser will excel in her role as associate principal supporting 2 schools, I'm concerned about her being pulled in so many directions and the risk of burnout. My worries, again, are for our community. I support either option 2 or option 3 for the referendum question, and my hope is to avoid losing any additional staff members from our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Ward.
Also, I'm going to try to stick to this script, but I'm known to not. Hi everyone. My name is. First off, I just want to say thank you for all the support you've all have been doing for our schools, right? Just to echo what Kelly said, been very impressed in the process. I wasn't part of the process, kind of like within arm's reach, knowing people who were part of the process post the loss of the April referendum. I've been very impressed in all the educational work and all the stuff I've learned a lot through the educational stuff that's been going on. My name is Brian Ward. I'm a social studies teacher here at the high school, and I'm the co-advisor of the Black Student Union and the Model United Nations, and I'm going into my 6th year here at MHS, and and I've loved it. Right, I felt very welcomed, and not really, I definitely tried to do a lot of different things and have felt supported the entire way. And I really wanted to be here really to express my support for a referendum question that is option 2 or 3. Obviously, knowing that 3 is going to better support teachers, and I'm going to kind of go through a couple of reasons why. And I think in general, thinking about it not being non-recurring and like reassessing after 4-5 years also could be an option as well. These are, obviously these are decisions you're going to have to make, but these are the multiple reasons why I'm kind of advocating for that is that I think, especially if there is the possibility of a non-recurring referendum, it's kind of unclear what the political terrain will be in 4 or 5 years, especially in the state legislature, and it gives time for the school district to kind of reassess what is going on with the relationship with the state. Obviously, knowing that redistricting in the state legislature might be a very different place, but also understanding that we have no illusions that the state's just going to come to the rescue, right? I think that's really important, but it also could be an important strategy. I think secondly, I know the survey data for option 2 and 3 kind of are very clear that not a majority of people would necessarily support those ones, right? I understand looking at that data, but also I think what's unclear that the data doesn't show us, didn't see what folks' thoughts were on it being non-recurring, but also that there has been a lot more organizing post-April election, right? And so there are community-based groups that are forming that can really kind of push the needle. And as those surveys said, the community supports the schools. And so I think there's a real opening there to kind of understand that those numbers are not stagnant. A third reason is that, if we're unable to pass a referendum that is based around 2 or 3, obviously that will mean more cuts, and that puts teachers like myself in like kind of precarious positions, right? To determine whether this is the place for me to be, right? I have 2 small children, right? And I have to consider that in our family's kind of financials as we kind of move forward. And many, may start looking for other jobs. Like I don't foresee myself doing that, but you never know kind of the terrain where other people are going. But more importantly, when cuts happen in schools, oftentimes, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they tend to affect vulnerable student populations the most, right? Because they are the ones that rely on school services a lot more than our less vulnerable student populations. So I think especially as we consider ourselves as kind of an equity-based district, that's something we really need to keep in mind. And I think finally, to really understand that the schools are the backbone of the McFarland community here. And I understand the increase in property taxes will hurt the community members like right now, but thinking longer term as we get into that advocacy piece, long-term ramifications on those property values could potentially go down. And I understand that the board and the audience here tends to understand these issues, right? But I just definitely wanted to express my support for option 2 and 3 from a teacher perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Melanie Robach.
I actually have materials for you. Here, you can take one and pass it down. I got 3 things you can take and pass down. And then,
There you go, boss.
and
So we don't have.
Oh, you don't do that?
We don't do the
Oh,
yielding.
well, I'm in trouble. So I'll just, the floor will open up and I'll go by.
Yeah.
Okay, so, does my intro count?
Well, thank you. Thank you for making this space for public comments and even scheduling this extra meeting. My name is Melanie Roback. I'm a McFarland parent of two. I've been in math education for over 20 years, not at all ever in McFarland. I also participated in the district's referendum group. I don't speak for that group now or for the district or any group. So, dear school board and McFarland community, this is a big week for our schools and community as you all consider what the referendum question on November's ballot will be. You're trying to figure out what bold ask you're going to make of taxpayers. You're in a tough position. And these options are all bold asks of the taxpayer, yet none of them quite meets the needs of the schools. You have to figure out what'll be worth it, worth your limited chance at asking as both stewards of the schools and representatives of the people, worth it to taxpayers, because at a $1,500, $1,600, $1,800 increase for the average homeowner at the end of 4 years, this better do what we want it to do. So in these precious minutes I get, I want to say something about the options. The survey options, I think you understand, but I really don't know if the community understands the small differences in cost between these options and yet the big differences in their impacts. So I'll say a little bit about that, but the information really does speak for itself. And first, let's understand that any of these three options entails a significant tax increase, but also a significant drop from the April referendum amount and its original time frame of 5 years. I think these options are an important signal that the district heard the community about April's being too much for too long. All of these options and any potential next steps bake in as the new normal the $1.2 million in cuts the district made soon after the no vote in April. These cuts including 10% of all department budgets and 11 staff positions, not to mention the recent loss of another elementary teacher and associate principal. These cuts may have become forgotten and normalized by the community, maybe, even the parents, but we shouldn't doubt that these cuts are still felt and will be felt by staff as they head into another school year with critically fewer hands on deck. I'm going to leave that out. So what's the difference between the options? This is where I'm going to gain some time because I hope people have learned this. The difference between the options is that the lowest one takes you all the way to a price tag, an increase of $1,500 over 4 years, $1,554 to be exact, but still cuts the equivalent of 23 staff members and keeps us below average on pay. While you're already at the $1,550 mark, if you increase that by $230, you will not cut staff and you will be able to compete in the local economy for teachers. And, we are the last ones not to pass a referendum to raise our revenue cap in the district. And so when there's a teacher shortage, again, this isn't about keeping up with the Joneses. This is about capitalism and competition in a teacher shortage. And we do not want to have the lowest pay when there are not enough teachers to go around. These options, we need to give people the best deal. My mom, once she figured out the differences between these options, she was frustrated. She said, they have to emphasize these differences, just $60 extra a year between option 1 and option 3. I'm a senior citizen. I want a deal. I don't want to spend $1,500 to cut 23 teachers and stay at the bottom. That's a lot of money. And, obviously option 3 is the biggest bang for the buck. And nobody wants to see their dollars spent, frivolously. In the context of the survey options all summer and with some distance from April's referendum, I think we've all started to think of option 3 as some sort of Cadillac option, but it's not at all. Even option 3 maintains these cuts and takes us down to about 78% of this April referendum amount, which is what the schools identified as what they need. Teachers were feeling squeezed even before that April promise to simply maintain. So do not, school board, do not write off option 3 as too bold or as the non-compromise that lets us have it all. It's not. None of these options lays out a plan for recouping those 11 staff cuts, and there's good reason to think of option 3 not only as the best deal, but as the responsible lowest we can go. Maybe even the sweet spot or significant compromise between April and nothing at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Melanie.
I will mention, I don't know if we said, but there will be a time for public comment at the end of the meeting as well. So people that spoke will have an additional 5 minutes at the end.
Al Rundy?
Or speak.
Good evening. I was on the Reg group with Joe and Melanie and others. I wasn't good looking enough, so we sent Joe to the meeting the other night, but I came tonight anyway. I just want to thank you guys. I think the village was shocked, or the district was shocked a little bit by the last referendum. I think there was a lot of reluctant no's and a lot of reluctant yeses because people just really didn't see the information coming. I just came from the village board meeting, and our village president, Karen Clow, mentioned that when they voted on a lot of these projects that people are upset about right now, nobody came to the meetings. Nobody knew about them until after they're done. And I think this was a little bit of a shock to folks. I want to congratulate Aaron and Jeff and everybody for putting together the Reg group for have the village or have the district reach out to folks, both yeses and nos, to come together and come up with a resolution. I want to echo Melanie's comments. I don't think anything less than option 2 would be any way meaningful. I think there's some pay increases in option 2, and we stay competitive with option 3. If you do option 1, it just doesn't seem to make sense to pay a lot of money to cut positions. Fiscally, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The one other thing I'd like to mention too tonight is that I just want you to be real cautious about the non-recurring issue. I know a lot of folks are pushing the non-recurring issue and it seems like, to quote Jim Hickey, a hoodwink that this money's going to go away, that this need for a budget is going to go away if we do a non-recurring. So say you do a non-recurring and in 3 years, you've now upped your per pupil amount to say $13,500 or $13,200 a person, a pupil. That 4th year under 3-year non-recurring, it's going to drop back down to where we're at now at 10, 7, 11,000 per pupil. And then we're going to be back asking with another fiscal crisis that we're going to have to deal with. And folks are going to look back in the rearview mirror saying, didn't we just fix this? And I do not think that that's going to bode well for the district long term. I will also say that the legislature, people that think the legislature is going to come in here and really help us out, I've talked to Jeff, I've talked to Aaron, I've talked to Craig and everybody in the Reg group. The legislature is probably likely to buy out some of the per pupil increase that's associated with the governor. I shouldn't say the legislature, the governor. That's a possibility. That would be tax relief. So every scenario that you see on that list of scenarios of what your tax bill will be, that will go down. I think we can educate folks about that. I just think that if they do come in and provide that kind of relief, in 3 years, when we come back with another referendum, we'll only be looking at that incremental increase to ask folks, and they'll be coming off lower tax bills than they thought going into that. But if we do it with a non-recurring, we're going to have to ask for all the money back to get us back up to the per pupil amount that we want to be at in order to maintain the school district. That's just my thoughts on this. I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it very much. We will carry on here and do some reading of comments that were sent in, and Megan and I will alternate here. I'll start. This one is from Signe Rose, a retired educator. Thank you for another opportunity for the public to share their thoughts at tonight's meeting. As a 3-decade teacher in this district and a dedicated substitute teacher for the last 10 years, I might have thought I had a reasonable amount of knowledge about referendums and related topics. Attending the listening session in the Performing Arts Center a few weeks ago, I learned that I was mistaken. This issue is multi-layered and complex, and I learned so much. The meeting was necessary for me, a lifelong educator, to increase my understanding. A change I've observed with some regularity in recent years at school is a change in outlook among some of our beginning teachers. They remain, as always, bright, hardworking, and child-centered. However, there is a shift in the lens of some young professionals in that they do not regard this career as one that will last. For various reasons, the longevity of teaching as a lasting career is being called into question. Capable and smart teachers can move a bit down the road, whether in or out of teaching, and substantially increase their earning and perhaps their feeling of professional self-worth. I'm not much of a risk taker. With that said, I strongly encourage you to pursue a referendum option that is worthwhile for this district, its teachers, and its students. That is, please don't be hesitant to pursue an option that demonstrates recognition of the struggles teachers will live with every day in the classroom, positions cut, positions shared, a shortage of professionals with experience to assist our students when needed, and on the list goes. In summary, option 1 does not show recognition of those needs. With my first grandson entering kindergarten this month, this is near and dear to my heart. Every single kid and every single school is worth it. Their success may depend on it.
Hello, my name is Sydney Tranel, and I am a 6th grade teacher entering my 11th year at IMMS. Of the many topics students learn about in 6th grade, there is one in particular that I am deeply concerned about. Over 30 years, we have provided exemplary outdoor education to our 6th grade students. The majority of those years have been spent at the beloved Camp Timberley. Fortunately for 6th grade students this year, the budget cuts will only slightly change their camp experience. However, additional budget cuts will force teachers to make significant changes to how this curriculum is delivered, with the greatest fear being the elimination of camp altogether. It would be a great loss to our future McFarland students if they miss out on this one-of-a-kind educational opportunity, an opportunity that teaches much more than just nature and the outdoors, but also important life skills, resilience, teamwork, and more. For the reasons stated above, as a McFarland resident and mom of 2 future Spartans, I fully support option 2 or option 3. Sincerely, Sydney Tranel.
Wendy Pliska. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for the work you've done on the referendum over the last year. I just wanted to share a perspective from the front lines. Education in 2024 is so different than it was when I started in 1999. Back then, I remember being one of literally hundreds of applicants for high school social studies positions. Teachers were begging for interviews. Now I'm getting cold calls from other districts asking me to apply for their open positions. My friends who are teachers and administrators in other districts are experiencing the same struggles we are. There are simply more teachers retiring, switching districts, and leaving the field altogether than there are new people entering our profession. For the foreseeable future, districts will need to be more teacher-friendly, have more attractive pay packages, better health insurance, etc., in order to recruit and retain teachers. If we cannot pass this referendum, we will lose many of our young and mid-career teachers, especially those in high-demand specialties. We will struggle to replace them. We cannot afford to lose our best and brightest teachers. We cannot afford to cut dozens of teaching and support positions. This referendum will determine whether or not we continue to provide the exceptional experience we are known for. Again, thank you for your work. I just felt compelled to chime in. Wendy Pliska.
My name is Molly Sanders, or Saunders. I am a 6th grade teacher at IMMS and have taught in this district for the last 8 years. In my 19 years of teaching experience, I have been a 6th grade teacher, a secondary literacy coach, and an ELL teacher for both children and adults. McFarland School District is an incredible district with fantastic teachers and families. This was evident to me when I made my decision to accept my position here in 2016. Although the salary was significantly lower than my previous district and also lower than other offers in the area, I knew that I wanted to be in this special place. At that time, my family was able to make decisions that allowed us to balance that deficit. Although salary improvements have been made in the past 8 years, McFarland continues to struggle to catch up to the districts around us. As my family continues to grow and life in general seems to be more expensive, a competitive salary is vital. My family currently resides in Edgerton, Wisconsin. Honestly, we can't afford to live in McFarland. The current rate of pay for teachers in this district does not provide us with that option. I travel 25 to 30 minutes to my school each day. I choose to do this because I love this district. I love my colleagues, our school, and our families. This is what keeps me in this district. However, the needs of my family will always come first. As a highly qualified and effective teacher, I know that I could get hired closer to home and be compensated at a higher rate for work as a professional educator. Even with a similar salary, the lack of travel and gas money would make a difference for my family. I am in full support of option 3 because I truly believe that providing a competitive wage for teachers will retain highly qualified teachers and also continue to bring them to our district. These teachers directly impact our students and the high quality of education that is expected in the McFarland School District. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Chris McGrath. Members of the school board, I am Chris McGrath, a teacher, homeowner, and parent in this district. Your decision about this referendum will have a tremendous impact on the future of this community. I urge you to formulate a referendum question that asks for option 3 on a recurring basis. Regardless of the high-minded rhetoric of coming together and finding a compromise, there is only one solution that actually works best for the kids. Our district needs a tremendous amount of money to continue to educate our children at the level that is expected and required for this community. Those who hope that the Democratic Party will retake the legislature and start splashing cash on the K-12 education, and therefore argue that we can get by on a smaller amount of money in a non-recurring referendum, are bound to be disappointed. Scott Walker might receive a lot of credit for reducing K-12 state funding, but Jim Doyle did it first. Hope is not a strategy. For you board members, it may be politically unpopular to ask for option 3 on a recurring basis. Perhaps you will lose your seat in the next election. I would suggest, however, that while that may sting, history would remember you as the 5 folks who decided to choose the hard right over the easy wrong and make a decision that preserved the core traditions and academic excellence of the McFarland School District. This decision will take courage. It is something in perilously short supply in this day and age. I urge you to model this character trait for our students and for our community members and ask for option 3 on a recurring basis.
To our esteemed school board, thank you for the thoughtful dedication to our children and to the success of our teachers, administration, and district. My family moved less than a mile last spring into the village for the schools and programming to support our firstborn, who at the time had some developmental concerns. No other reason. We knew in McFarland he would have teachers, staff, and administrators there to support him and us for whatever was yet to come. And I'm not the only family where this is the case. You have a tough decision ahead of you regarding the details of the referendum. My request to each of you is to ask for what is needed to not only meet the basics, but continue to excel, to be the destination for families to find community and raise successful children. Ask for what is needed to support adequate staffing, special education, library and technology, department budgets, and more. The commitment to information transparency and community engagement was lacking and now is in full force. Some of us will feel a financial pinch, but the bright, pride-filled eyes of a child reaching beyond their known potential makes the pinch worth it. Thanks, Meredith Huey.
Eric Johnson. First, I wanted to highlight some information I was given regarding the survey. When you look at the survey results, page 13, as standalone options among any group, option 3 was actually the favorite by far, even though it was the most expensive. Page 14 of the results is deceiving. The survey company takes the percent support for option 3 and adds it to the votes for option 2 when they report support for option 2, making it look like option 2 has more votes. They do this because clearly anyone who will vote yes for option 3 will vote yes for 2. So instead of noticing that only 5% want option 2, they summarize that 44.7% would vote yes on option 2. Second, they do the same with option 1. Instead of focusing on the fact only 5% of respondents liked option 1, they summarize that options 3 plus 2 plus 1, people would vote yes. So it looks like the most people want option 1. The truth is that the majority favor it for all groups, including the overall weighted results for McFarland, is option 3. It has more support than any other options, more than something less, more than the no's. I really want the board to look at those numbers when deciding on how much to ask for. Third, the schools have always been our priority in McFarland. They need to stay that way. I believe the district is now up $1.5 million in cuts. There aren't meaningful cuts left. We will lose teachers. We can't have that. I want to remind all community members, young and old, people have voted yes for our kids before. It is now our turn to vote yes for others' kids. The board needs to ask for the amount that is going to be most beneficial to our district. We are not trying to keep up with the Stoughtons or Oregons, as someone wrote. We want to keep our bar high when it comes to education. Fourth, some people have stated some community members are not behind this referendum or want the lowest amount. I have not heard that. There is now tons of support from all ages. Lastly, when all is said and done, a good education is the key to success. We as a community need to vote yes when the time comes for the kids of McFarland. Go Spartans. Thank you for all your time and efforts.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Detloff. I am a kindergarten teacher and have taught in this district for the last 19 years. The budget costs have already affected me with larger classroom sizes and less support. With more students in each classroom, I will have less time with each individual student. With a shared administrator in my building, I am worried about the response to behaviors which will affect not only the student in crisis, but the general success of the classroom and the culture and climate of our campus. I am in full support of option 2 or 3. Jen Detloff, kindergarten teacher.
Dear members of the McFarland School Board, my name is Trish Fortune and I am a community member and teacher in McFarland. I just completed my 25th year in this district and am passionate about McFarland staying one of the top schools in our county and state. I am writing to voice my concern and worries about our financial situation and the operational referendum. I am pleading to the village voters to vote yes on this upcoming referendum, whether it be option 1, 2, or 3. I believe any option is better than no option, and I'm hoping for option 2 or 3 because then we do not have to make any more cuts and are able to demonstrate the support needed for our district as a whole. I am so very hopeful that the village can unite and work together for the best interest of our students and schools, which is the soul of our community. The McFarland teachers are so proud of their jobs and the students that they have taught and get to teach. It would be sad for any of that to be jeopardized. Thank you for your time and efforts. Please feel free. Trish Fortune.
Hello, my name is Kim Lewis, and I am a special educator in the McFarland School District, as well as a parent and a taxpayer. I have lived in McFarland for almost 20 years, and I've worked in the district for 13 years. I am writing to offer my full support for referendum option number 2 or number 3. Our schools are one of the main reasons that so many people flock to this community. We need to do all we can to continue to support our district, our teachers, and our students. Our district has worked very hard to minimize the impact of the necessary budget cuts on students this year, but it's an impossible situation with the amount of money the state has left us needing. This is not a sustainable situation, which only grows worse without a solid referendum in place. Thank you, Kim Lewis.
Okay, our last red comment is from Elise Weber. My name is Elise Weber. I am the IMMS choir and general music teacher and a graduate of McFarland Schools. I am writing to voice my strong support for referendum options 2 or 3. Budget cuts are already impacting our service to the students through loss of teaching and support positions and cuts to our program budgets. With each small cut of support staff, FTE, and budgets, we are all letting our students down and creating an environment with less time and support for the children of McFarland. From my personal experience teaching in 2 other school districts prior to McFarland, these cuts seem small on paper, but leave a huge impact on the success of students. I strongly encourage you to consider referendum options 2 or 3 to avoid such dramatic cuts to our children's educational experience. Additionally, McFarland is just recently on a path toward teacher compensation that is competitive with surrounding schools. Leaving this path will impact the quality of staff applying and the ability to retain staff such as myself. And we have one additional in-person comment. Dr. Jim Hickey, the floor is yours.
Wow, the floor. I'm literally off the road, and I apologize for my, normally I'm sure I'm much more camera ready. I didn't get a chance to go to the green room. Very simple, a couple things. One is, in my humble opinion, I really think the Board of Education should go with the recurring option. As to what option you do, anything short of recurring is, in my opinion, irresponsible if you don't recur. So if some district voters will feel hoodwinked when you come back in a couple years and they're like, well, wait a minute. And their whole memory is going to be like, what do you mean? So you're going to come back to get some more money to fill the cliff, and then you're going to need more money. So let's go at it. Let's run at it. Go recurring, please. And I got another thing here. Oh, you know what? It's going to take strong and vibrant educating of our district residents. And they're open, and we got smart district residents to understand the difference between recurring and non-recurring. And, yeah, I understand we or you or us, we're all making ourselves somewhat vulnerable to, well, this is what the school specialist perception survey said, isn't it? You didn't listen to us. Why would we listen to you? Why did you ask us? We gave you your opinion, our opinion, but you didn't ask it. You didn't listen, right? Well, I think a couple things. We didn't educate them before we sent out the survey, okay? And that's no one's fault. That's all right. I mean, hey, life goes on, and we can point that out. And the second thing is, we just got to point out that after educating them and showing them the difference between a recurring and a non-recurring, that this is really the way to go. And we're going to have to be strong leaders, and we're going to have to go out and do some significant public relations. And I mean, if it's sitting on the corner in that nice little Farwell theater they built, the Village a while back there, those nice chairs and preaching from the corner, we're going to need to do that. And so let's not run scared. Let's run at it. We don't have to run at it with a huge money amount, but it's a delayed tape here on camera, I just noticed. Anyway, I wonder why they do that. Could it be language? I don't know. Anyway, okay, yeah. Yeah, so I understand. It's a little humor here. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate all your work that you guys have done. That whole referendum engagement committee worked hard. But don't fall on this thing that, well, we didn't listen to the perceptions thing. Well, true, but we learned. We didn't educate them. We've learned over time. Now I'm getting a little verbose and redundant, which I'm going to stop. One last thing. We have some people on that committee that are pretty sharp, and they got the beat of the state. I'd be listening to them pretty strongly. So thank you for your time, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Hickey. Okay, moving on. Aaron, how would you like to proceed?
So the way that we're going to move forward tonight is Jeff Mahoney, Director of Business Services, and I are going to give a little overview presentation just to reorient the board and the community to how we got to this point. And then it's really going to be open for board discussion. There is no action agenda item for tonight. So the idea is that the board will have a discussion tonight, hopefully begin to take the options that are in front of them and start to get them down to hopefully one, but maybe two, that can come for vote on during the regularly scheduled board meeting on Monday night. So we're just going to walk you through some things, and then after the board has their discussion, we will have another opportunity for public comment for those that are in person here tonight. All right, so just a little bit of a reminder about what the April referendum said. It was a 5-year recurring referendum, recurring meaning the amount for the 28-29 school year continues on beyond that, at that level. So the total over that time was 10.6 million, and you'll see the tax impact. One of the things I'll point out with this that's a little bit different is that it did have a larger jump in the first year. The options that we presented in the survey all had more of an even amount because the fund balance was weighted more heavily in the early years than what you see here. But all of them include using 1.2 million of fund balance over the 5 years. As you will know, that this referendum did not pass by a vote of 49% to, or 59% to 41%. Yes.
Comment back on that.
Sure.
Just like with any other of our examples, that $400,000 property in 24-25 is actually, that's that value of in 23-24, and those are indexed 7% equalized value increases each of the years. So by the time you're getting to a 4-year or a 5-year, those are indexed for increased value. So they're not just stagnant at a $400,000 value.
Yeah, so what we found is that some members of the public were then adding estimated property value increases on top of us already including it in our figures, so it was distorting the tax impact. So through the referendum engagement group, through many meetings, we were able to gather a lot of feedback about why the referendum didn't pass, and I wanted to pull together this slide just to represent some of the things that we've done since that time. The too much money for too long was the most common thing that we heard. All the current referendum options are for less money and for a shorter period of time than was the April referendum. Discussion about a lack of community engagement. As you've heard, the referendum engagement group was formed and has worked. There was a survey administrated, community feedback meetings as well. And I would say too, something that we've also had are the board member office hours and many, many conversations with community members since that time. Another concern was, well, you need to tighten your belt was sort of the phrase, make some cuts before asking for money. The district has made now $1.5 million in cuts, the majority of that being staffing, which is impacting our students. We don't want to discount the fact that we've tried to minimize the impact on our students, but that and the $600,000 cuts in other areas will impact our students and their learning environment. It's unavoidable in the work that we do. If we had things we could cut that wouldn't impact students, we would have cut them a long time ago. Confusion about school funding. People not understanding, you heard that a lot in the public comments, both tonight and in other nights. The community feedback meetings provided information. People came, people have watched it, people have said that impacted them in their learning, so that's something we've tried to do. And a lack of clarity on how the money would be spent. So the survey included very specific references to staff salaries and benefits and how they would be impacted with each of those options. So those are the things that we're trying to do differently and learn from our previous mistakes. We met, of course, as you know, during a board work session on April 11th. And at that time, we showed this graphic, which still applies. There's that $3.7 million deficit for next year, and you can address that through a combination of the use of fund balance, decreasing your expenses, can be staffing and non-staffing, increasing revenues, and a possible referendum. Tonight, we're here talking about that bottom box. We're going to go over some of the things that we've done in those other areas to get to this point where we're now at that bottom box and what's remaining after those other areas have been addressed. When we met that evening, we laid out this framework, which has guided all of our decisions in terms of budget reductions. What's the impact on students? What are the long-lasting implications? And how do we protect our personnel that are here? So those were things that really guided our decisions, acknowledging that any cut has an impact on students, that staff morale is critical, and that is a concern that we all share, and I know the board members share, so I'm not telling you something you don't already know. And how do we retain staff? When you're in a budget crisis, people get worried about stability, and there are other options there for our very talented staff members. So the $1.5 million in cuts, we had several collaborative groups, tried to work really closely both with the board and staff to make decisions. And you know that we paused hiring in some areas, reduced sections in other areas. As was mentioned, the most recently reduced a section of kindergarten and the 3-5 associate principal position. Also had a 10% cut across budgets. Administrative pay salary increases were reduced. We're still short, just for next year alone, $2.2 million. And just a reminder that that increases every year as expenses increase, and the state, the revenue cap does not increase to compensate for inflation as it did prior to 2009. So without a referendum, just a reminder, $1 million in cuts is the equivalent of 14 teaching positions. So for next year, you're talking about, if there's no referendum, we're still $2.2 million short just for next year alone. That's the equivalent of 31 positions or 15% of our professional staff. And that's because staffing makes up 77% of our budget. And we do have fixed costs that we really don't have a lot of room to change. You know, there may be a few dollars here and there when you move some things around, but it's not 2.2 million or even close to that. The referendum engagement group, we've talked about that. That was really to collaborate, look at our funding needs, identify options for next steps. You had 28 active members, a diverse group of people, a lot of different perspectives, and grew and learned together. We talked about why the referendum didn't pass. We analyzed our funding needs, looked at possible budget cuts, and ultimately explored the possibility of a referendum, resulting in the survey and a review of that survey in the community feedback meetings. You can see our process here. I will say one of the things that I'm so grateful for that group, besides the many hours and the passion and dedication that they shared, was the thoughtfulness about engaging the community throughout the process. The survey was not just some exercise. Those community feedback meetings were not performative. They were meant to really engage the public, provide them with simple information, hopefully easy to understand, often that we suspected they may not have known when they voted in April, and then to gather feedback from how they responded, and then to present something to you last week, August 5th. Talked about the survey options. You know, all of those were less than the April amount. All were recurring 4 years, included the $1.2 million in cuts. The board tonight and on Monday night when you make your vote, you can do whatever you want with those options. You don't have to follow the options that were there. Before we get into more of that conversation, Jeff's going to talk a little bit about fund balance. I know this is things that the board probably understands quite well, but it's a good review for you as you engage in this conversation, and certainly for our community to understand as well.
Thank you, Eric. And thanks for doing the first 11 slides.
Yes, my
So
pleasure.
I think I only get 3. That'll
Yep.
be great.
Yep.
So just some notes on fund balance. Again, we're doing very well. We had a planned ending to this last fiscal year, which just ended on June 30th with about 13.6 million. That's going to have a little bit of an increase when we get done with our final auditing. That will be finally adjusted to prior to December 1, but is still pretty darn close to 13.6 million. We needed a balance roughly of 10.6 million for this year to avoid cash flow borrowing. Cash flow borrowing is used to, if you don't have enough of a balance, to make sure you can pay your bills, because our receipts from our revenues from both our local property taxpayers and state aid comes in well after our expenditures have started. So typically districts face difficulties with cash flow in both November through December, and then again in May, June of the following spring. So it is important, and it's something that our district has built over the last several years. We stopped short-term borrowing in 2017. It took us 13 years to build the reserve, and we were fortunate in school district. We used one-time funds that we would receive from WEVA when they were not part of our operational budget to build that cash flow reserve strategically. It's defined in our board policy, and there are recommended levels from DPI. As I mentioned, we use it for cash flow. We also use it to create investment opportunities to bring in interest earning to operate our budget. We count on a certain dollar amount each year to operate our budget for salaries and benefits. It's also important to have a significant reserve so that when you're going out for bond ratings, whether it's going out for bond ratings on even a short-term borrowing, but also on your, when you're going to buy a house or build new buildings, you can get a better rate. So emergencies. Many of you have seen that we had kind of an emergency this spring with a flooded cafeteria area that, while we are working with our insurance to go after the other company's insurance on it, we are still in dispute over the fact that that had asbestos abatement requirements. Insurance does not cover asbestos abatements. There's not a policy in the world that covers that. So that's a $60,000 cost that's not budgeted for. While we are confident we will be bringing that back to us through legal channels, it's those types of things that happen that you need reserves, just like a household. We are planning to continue to use a portion of our fund balance over whatever term the board decides to use, length of time. Our last referendum had us using 1.1 million in the last referendum. So when we talk about are we asking for more than we need to, we're actually asking for less than we need, because we are planning to use some fund balance over the next 4 to 5 years, even in the last referendum. So lots of notes on fund balance. I might have gotten into the weeds pretty heavy, but those would be my notes on fund balance.
Yes. And now we're just going to review the options that were provided in the survey. You also have that in a handout there, just so you can reference that when you make a conversation. As you know, there were 3 options, the referendum option 1 being the, I guess, least expensive, but resulting in the significant $1.6 million in cuts, and at the end of 4 years, you can see that the price tag is $1,554 on that. And it does not increase our salaries to the point that it's competitive with other area districts. There would be some increase, but not enough to help us compete with the area. The difference between 1 and 2, besides the increase to $1,677 on a property value of $400,000, is there are no cuts. But again, it does not raise our salaries to be competitive. It just keeps that current $1.2 million in cuts, as you know, all options have. Finally, option 3 not only does not have cuts, it also helps us to increase our salary in comparison to our peers. So that would help us increase staff retention and attract new people to our amazing district and community. And, maybe even some people could live in the community that they teach. You've seen this, I kind of got cut off funny the way it's displaying, but you've seen this, you have it all over, there's many handouts, and the way that the survey results were done, it was explained in a public comment earlier this evening, but it was assumed that if someone voted for option 3, they could only choose one option. And if they voted for option 3, it was assumed that they would support option 2, option 1, and a smaller referendum. Basically, it was assumed they would support a referendum. So you can see here when you weight it based on population, with 70% of our voters being non-parents, non-staff, and 30% being parents. You weight that out, and that's where the percentages fell, with 40% roughly supporting option 3, 45, about 5% with each of the options, and you get to the majority. As has been pointed out many times, and is definitely worth noting, you have several things that have changed, largely related to community engagement. So one of the things that I don't know, I can't speak for the referendum engagement group, I can speak for myself, is I knew some people would be informed by the feedback sessions. I honestly thought that some of the same people that came to the meetings in the winter before the April referendum, I thought we'd see some of those same people, and that the people that already understood it were just going to understand it even better. We had, and the group members shared this, I shared this, we had many people come up to us and say, I used to think this because of this meeting, I now think this. And certainly that was a hope that we had, that people with more information can make a more informed decision, but I think it really was a powerful impact that was greater than expected, at least in my case. Also been many, many, many community conversations. Not a day has gone by since this the survey results were shown at the feedback sessions where I haven't talked to a community member about this. People are much more engaged, and there is also advocacy within the community. It's somewhat informal at times, and other times it's very organized. That's very different from what we had in April. So, I just say this just because that snapshot, we don't want to disregard the survey results, but we can't get to that point. My recommendation to the board is that we just make a decision solely on that point in time. I think of it like a poll in an election. That data is only valid for so long. And as been mentioned, there was less education before. Partly that was because we wanted to get the survey out. The other thing is I think we have to be cautious about solely relying on an educated electorate. There will be people that show up to the polls that don't have the information. However, there is a commitment to make sure that those are as few of people as possible, and certainly as compared to April. What could still change? So state aid amounts, we've talked about this, right? Our July estimates were much greater than we anticipate, to the point of if you look at all of those referendum options in year one, so option one is $373 on a $400,000 property, all the way up to $432. All of those, our estimates are, each of those, if the state aid came in at the estimate in July that they provided, it would be $100 less. So you take an option three, right, at the $432, comes down to $332, only in the first year, right? But that's way less than 373, which is the level for level one. Now, we don't know where that's going to come in. You know, we're conservative in our estimates, and I think the public would expect us to be cautious. In October, we will know more, so that could still change. School report cards come out, state testing results. Last year, as you know, we had the second highest school report card in Dane County, right behind our friends in Wanakee. Those will be coming out in October. Will we still be the second highest? I don't know. We've got the preliminary state testing results back, but they were all renormed, so you can't compare them to the previous year. They all went up, but they all went up, I think, for a lot of people. So we're waiting to hear how we compare with other districts. That will be something the public deserves to know and will want to know, and could go either way. Final enrollments. We have declining enrollment right now. The last I knew, it was, I think, 46 students. We shared that in a previous board meeting, although that changes by the minute here, as our busy registrar, Emily Broom, would tell you. And that could change, because third Friday's a big time for a district. That determines your revenue based on your student enrollment. Other things that could still happen, we don't know. There may be some October surprises that could influence either way. So you heard on the 5th, the referendum engagement group brought a couple options for you to consider, acknowledging that there was not unanimous agreement. Yeah, I don't know why I tried that word. I've never been able to say it, but yeah, not everybody agreed with these options, and you actually heard from some members tonight that shared some other ideas, and that's okay. This is too complicated to just have one idea. And so what they brought forward was the idea of option one for 4 years non-recurring, option two for 3 years non-recurring for the board to consider. What I would say there that's important to acknowledge is this idea of non-recurring, that a lot of these decisions are based on what we're trying to get past, while also trying to find that sweet spot to what is also okay for the district. As I shared with you last week, and you know, I'm a superintendent of the school district. I'm going to tell you what is best for the school district was April. That is best for our kids. However, we recognize that there's only so much a taxpayer can afford. Understood, right? If I was just had my school district kids lens, that was best. That means option three is the best for our kids and for our staff, which is best for our kids, right? So that's important to know. So it's a bit of a guessing game, you know, and I think it is about risk tolerance, as you know. Jeff's going to talk a little bit about kind of some next steps and some things for you to consider and walk us through the last few slides before you get to talk.
So obviously, we discussed, and we surveyed folks on recurring. We did not survey them on non-recurring. Recurring provides, again, a system in which each year it's building to help take care of inflationary, take care of goals of the board, goals of the district. And when it's done, it's still there. You are not hitting a fiscal cliff. These two pictures really kind of show a really good goal there of the recurring is a nice long drive that you can continue to do. And the non-recurring is you got to stop and pay money every few years, or go to Illinois in every few miles. So, recurring is more fiscally responsible for the school district long-term, because again, it provides an ongoing fund that builds a base. It's a long-term fix. It allows for a conversation when you do end to either look at some smaller changes, look at what's going on with items that are happening around the state, but it doesn't put the district into basically what our state provided us, which was a non-recurring one-time fund solution from the feds with ESSER funds. They provided us non-recurring and now have us at this fiscal cliff. So, be my explanation about recurring and non-recurring. We can always revisit if there are questions. This grid has a lot of information on it, but when I think about planning out and why we've usually planned out for 5 years our budgets, it's been looking at making sure that we're looking at what is the state biennial budget cycle. We are in the second year of the current state biennial budget. Our legislature will start beginning to debate the next 2 year, which would be in that green area for 25-26 and 26-27. Yeah, sometimes we get all of that information by June or July of where they're headed. So we will likely already be into our 25-26 budget without maybe even a biennial budget passed yet. But you can see how the biennial budgets would line up with, if you go down to the 4-year referendum, 3-year referendum, and the 2-year referendum. A reminder, we're already in year 1 of whatever referendum comes forward. So length of time is very important to look at. If you looked at a 2-year, which are regulatory, the regs, what did we actually?
Referendum engagement group.
Referendum engagement group. I call them the regs. Yeah, they didn't come forward with a 2-year. A 2-year would mean you're having this conversation after an election to already start funding for 26-27, because by the time a election occurs, tax levies get set, you're already halfway through the fiscal year of year 1. Year 3, again, is probably very tight on that as you turn around. A 4-year allows the district, whether it's a recurring or non-recurring, probably to plan the best opportunities for its 2 things. One, our health plans and our compensation plans. 80% of our budget is tied to those areas. So we are ending our current compensation plan at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, 2025. And our health plan, which we've had a long relationship with our HMO provider after about 6 years. So we have to begin our planning for that. And those are typically 3 years to 5-year agreements. And those are significant costs to the school district and are some of the reasons why our staff stay with us and come to us, because we've had long traditional health plans. So those are some substantial considerations that hopefully that color coding helps there a little bit. And then also presidential elections. If the district is going to stick with maybe a philosophy or a plan of using presidential elections as when it's going to time its referendums, it is likely that even if you have a 4-year and something comes through the legislature, there's a good chance that you're maybe back in 28, 29 with some of these conversations again with another election. Years 3 or, excuse me?
We got it one too.
Yeah, we kind of. Size of referendum. Probably the best piece here is I provided you a handout, and Aaron, if you go to the next slide. You'll see the kind of a lot of information here. And if you work left to right, top to bottom, we did provide you with the April 2nd failed referendum, what the impact would have been on a $400,000 home. I showed that what that would look like for a 4-year and also a 5-year, which that's what we went for. I think it's also important to note that we just came off of, a 23-24 fiscal year in which a homeowner of that $400,000 home in 23-24 paid more in 22-23 than they did in 23-24. We've had some comments from our members, from our community here that have pointed out our legislature has been providing tax relief, continues to provide tax relief. A lot of times they don't come directly to us. Those come in the form of school tax levy credits. And so when people do look at their property tax bills and go back last year, 5 years, they're generally going to see that their school portion of their property tax bills have went down. Sometimes to the tune of $1,000 difference from 5 years ago on a normally adjusted home, average home in our communities. So it is important that if we were just talking about school district taxes, there's been tax relief to our taxpayers for school purposes. What's not in this document is that the school levy tax credit is going up another 7%. We can't factor that in because that doesn't come to the district and then come off of the taxes before we give it to the village for processing. That goes to the village and then they process it based on the amount that DOR certifies. So right there, I think we've talked about that. We've been very honest about our estimates. These are worst case estimates. They don't include the greatest potential for state aid. As Aaron alluded to, the July 1 DPI aid estimate, which is usually within a couple percentage points, is significantly more than our estimates. That is good news for our taxpayers, but it's not the information we have at this time. That does not come until October 15th. So when you look at option 3, option 2, and option 1, if you were to consider a 4-year on all of those, I just want to go to that 4th year of 27-28. Regardless of the option, if it's a recurring, that 7.6 million, 7 million, or 6.4 million would continue into the 28-29 year. It would not fall off. If you do a non-recurring, the district will be starting that year with not only an inflationary need, but 7.6 million, 7 million, or 6.4 million less. Similar to what we're kind of doing because of how the state had us use federal funds at this point.
But currently, it's a lot less than that.
It is a lot less than that at the moment. So I hope that graphic helps you with your planning this evening.
It also allows you, if you decide to work with years, you can just take off a year and look at a 3-year instead. We would not advise the board to look at a 2-year or a 5-year. You know, we're trying to help guide you at 3 to 4 years. Of course, you can do whatever you feel is right. This is your decision ultimately. However, we don't think that those are the best options at this point. So that concludes what we had to share. And so now it's questions, comments, discussion, for the board. And I'm going to sort of, as I've mentioned to many of you in our meetings this week, I'm going to sort of challenge you to start to throw out some ideas. And I think it's important for the public to understand that what the board is inviting you into observe is them, kind of looking at these issues from all the angles, coming up with ideas. So please respect that the board's trying to think this through. These are tough decisions, but the board feels it's important to have those in public so people can hear the thoughts, the considerations, and hear our thinking evolve as we listen to each other and consider the tough decisions ahead.
I think what I'd like to do is just kind of go around the board individually and give us your feelings in general, any specific or detailed ideas you might have. I just want everyone to kind of understand where each board member is thinking and see if we can't come up with a consensus here pretty soon. But I would just like to go around and hear everybody individually first. How about it, we start with you, Megan? Megan F.
All right. Can I just get one clarifying question first? Jeff, with each of the options, and we use the 1.1 million in fund balance over that 4 years, does that ever bring us below that 10.6 where we have to go into short-term borrowing?
No. So we never go below that 10.6 within that. And we really have to be careful not to get too close to that 10.6 because that can, on a given year, there may be unexpected expenses where you do need to use something beyond that. So.
Right. Okay. It's a lot. I mean, I know we've been hearing this information for a long time. It's still a lot to digest and process. Where I'm at in general is trying to figure out what is it's the sweet spot everyone's been talking about, but really trying to dig into that about what is the most responsible thing for the school district and what can get passed. I think the courageous choice and the hard choice and the right hard, I really appreciated those phrases. I think it's really hard to determine because we can ask for what we want because we all wanted what was in April. So now we have to figure out what can get passed. So I probably just need a little more processing time before I can really think about specifics or talk about specifics. I don't have that totally in my head yet. So next.
Are you through, Megan?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Bruce, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I'm just going to hope and pray that my I don't get cut off or something like that. So please let me know. You guys can hear me. Good. All right. So I was kind of jotting down some things as we were going through this presentation, and I want to thank everyone who's there tonight, and I want to thank again Aaron and Jeff. I just think you guys have worked tirelessly towards this. I think everyone knows that our community supports our schools. I think that's something we got to remember. I think it is a balance. We've got to do, first of all, what's best for the kids. I think if I was to say there's a balance, I guess I'm going to tip the balance. We have to do what's best for the kids, but at the same time, we have to be cognizant of the taxpayers. And I so was pleased with the Community Referendum Engagement Committee, what went on there. I personally feel option number one is just totally irresponsible. You're basically throwing money at something that isn't going to help us. At the last board meeting, I talked about, we've gone over a cliff, we're hanging onto a branch, we're 12 feet down, and then we're asking for an 8-foot rope. What's the point? You're going to have to just keep on making cuts. I think at that point, I'm worried about school enrollment. And I just think it's going to encourage people to say, I'm looking elsewhere. And then I think you're going to have teachers leaving as well. So I just don't see it as being responsible. I tend to favor at this point option number 2. My heart tells me I would like to go to number 3. But I think in the end,
Every time. Dramatic pause for effect.
keep on going back.
You did cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Talk fast, Bruce.
Bruce, can you turn off your video?
That will give you more bandwidth.
Can someone please take a picture of him right now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, do you know how to turn off your video, your camera?
Yes.
That sometimes will allow us, okay.
Is that better?
Yes, so
I just
you,
don't know where, I don't know where it cut off.
I'm gonna tell you, the last thing we heard was that you favor option 2, your heart says option 3,
Good. Okay.
and then,
Yeah,
so.
and then it was the bottom line. If there's anything that I think I've picked up from this community referendum engagement committee, it is that people are most concerned about the bottom line. And so I feel in some ways at this point, I favor option number 2 because I think we can probably keep the cost of it to below or to what I guess we were talking with the community referendum engagement committee members. I mean, there were people who were definite no's, and I think a lot of them came and said, you know what, I think even that makes more sense going with number 2 for like 3 years than it does to go with option number 1 for 4 years. I believe it should be recurring. This is my feeling, and that's why I could even support a 2-year referendum, because I think at the end of 2 years, you're going to have a potential change in the legislature. You're going to have the governor veto, Governor Evers' line item veto that's going to be dealt with. And I think so either school funding or property tax relief is going to be in there. And then when you take into account the state aid funding increase that we are anticipating, again, it's not for sure, but we know it's pretty likely, then I think we can keep the cost, that bottom line, to where it needs to be. I like recurring because I think it is so important that we raise our revenue cap. I agree exactly with Al that otherwise you go right back to where we were, and you got to ask for even more money just to try to keep even where we are. We need to go up in that sense. We need to be raising that revenue cap. And as I say, I still feel somewhat optimistic that the governor's his line item veto and the change in legislature will help. I don't know how much, but I think it can. I think we can revisit a referendum in 2 to 3 years because that will be at the end of the biennial spending, the budget. And I think we can do, as one of the speakers said, we can reassess where we are. And I think it's something that, again, gets back to the educating our community and say, look, we're going to try to keep it short, but at the same time, be prepared. We will come back. But I think if it's reoccurring, again, we'll have raised the revenue cap that we won't be having to ask for this enormous lift all over again. I mentioned about enrollment declining, and I think it will only get worse if we become more draconian some of our cuts. And then lastly, I do feel like in some ways we talked with some very important people who were against the initial referendum. Yes, I agree totally. I've come across a lot of people who have changed their mind. But I think it's important that in some ways we did give our word to some of these people, that we didn't just sit there and say, thanks for your input, and now we're going to do what we want to do. I think we're trying to say, look, we're all in this together. We need to work on this. I think it's really important. Personally, I would like to see an associate principal reinstated at Wabisa Intermediate School. I have so much respect for what that person, Kelly, was doing at that school. I visit these schools, all the schools, 4 times every year. So I visited that school 12 times in the last 3 years. And to be honest with you, I rarely saw her because she was always in action. She was all over the place. And it was well put down that the cuts are always going to affect the kids who are the marginal students. And they're the people who need it. I really think it's in some ways a wise investment to have someone in that position to help these young kids kind of get into the school, get situated, get to have an opportunity to kind of become successful students. And I think it's well spent. So I kind of think of that as saying, okay, we may not get number 3 per se, because we talked about trying to keep that bottom line to where it's reasonable to the public. But one thing that we would like to kind of say is we would like to get that position back. And I know that Aaron and Jeff, you've gone out of your way to put up a program where we can try to, reinstate, or not reinstate, but have someone cover that. But I feel like in the end, having that person there is, I think, invaluable. So I kind of feel like I'm trying to work that compromise because I do believe ultimately that's how we're going to be successful. I hope you heard me.
We got it.
Good, thank you.
All right, Tom, you go ahead.
Sure. I appreciate all of the information that's been provided, basically all summer, and even last spring. And from the committee that met this summer, the information that was
Excuse me,
provided.
Tom?
Yes.
I'm sorry, could you speak a little closer to the microphone? I'm having trouble hearing you.
How's that?
Perfect, thank
Okay.
you.
I appreciate all the information that was shared last week. I have a predicament. It's a conflict. I'm a board member. I'm here to represent the whole community. But I'm also a lifetime educator. I know firsthand what it takes to help kids be successful, to help families be successful, to help teachers be successful. And the only way we can do that is if we can support them as much as we can. Let's face it, the number one factor that determines the success of a student is the adult in front of them. If we start losing adults, we have larger class sizes, we may have greater challenges within the classroom, and we would be going backwards. As a district, we should be moving forward. We have a fine reputation in Dane County and, as a matter of fact, throughout the state of Wisconsin. That reputation was not built in a day or two. It's been built over since in the 60s and 70s, decades. I have a hard time saying the reputation that we have now, we're going to drop down 2 or 3 notches. I think this community is willing to support option 3 as a recurring referendum. I think we've done a lot of work since April. We talked about 5 reasons why the referendum failed. 5 reasons why the referendum failed. I have 3 down here. Lack of communication. The communication has multiplied, unbelievably. Not only in formal meetings and one-on-one, but I know my communication with community members of all ages has increased significantly. Now, some still have issues or concerns about the tax rate, okay? But the more community members understand, the more they understand it, how important it is to continue the same level of support for our students in support of our staff. They seem to have a better understanding and awareness. And we've already cut positions. We've already cut $1.5 million. And we haven't even addressed that yet. And I would urge us as a community not to fall any further back. The fund balance, we don't want to go below 10.6 million. We're at 3.6 million now. We will use 1.1 million, I think, over the next 4 years. We talked about WEVA funding. Thankfully, we have another source of funding through WEVA. If we didn't have WEVA out there, where our district is a host school for their 5,000 students, we would be in greater straits than we are right now. We would have been for the past few years. So based on that, based on my common sense, my passion for our kids, we are here for the kids. We all have to suffer. I mean, I'm retired. I've lived here for 40 years almost. I've seen drastic changes, positive changes. We have gone through rough times before. I mean, one time we thought about cutting all athletics, and that didn't happen, and it should not have happened. So again, from my perspective, I think option 3 is a recurring referendum is what I would really like to see us move forward to. In fact, even a 4-year referendum, but I don't think that's reasonable at this point. Option 3, recurring.
3
3
years? Okay.
Because that fits better into our overall budget also. And, you know, if we have non-recurrent or 1 or 2, a 2-year recurrent, it's going to be a mismatch between what we as a district do financially versus what we have available to us. And that's my comment at this point. I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Thank you, Tom. Megan?
Phew, happy Thursday. How are we all doing? Yeah, awesome. I just felt the need to like lighten things up a little bit. Okay, so for those of you that know me, I tend to be pretty blunt. So I'm just gonna lay it all out there. Option 1 for me, not even on the table. I think it's irresponsible for us to even go down that road. So unlike Tom, I'm not a lifetime educator. My background is in business and sales directorship. So I tend to look at things from a very data-driven approach, as well as a PR perspective and the ability to get something done. I've had lots of conversations with tons of people, and we all know that the kids and the school district is truly what brings our community together. I have seen the most amazing things come out of this community. I mean, when Harvey the dog went missing, it was a big old, like, yes, let's get this dog back. When the poor little 2-year-old girl wandered into the quarry, thousands of people descended into McFarland to help find her. And although a school district referendum is not a life or death situation, it is about our kids, and we have to remember that. I think it's also really important to understand that the minority of people in this community are the ones with kids in the district. And we have to think about the 65 to 70% of people that are going to be voting in November. A lot of those people fall outside of the realm of being able to afford a large increase. So we have to be so concerned about that as well. So I personally love option 3. I have kids in the district. I want to see them succeed. I love our teachers. I have teachers that have become family to me. I have teachers that I have cultivated long-term relationships with, and we need to keep those teachers in our community, and we have to compensate them appropriately. But that being said, for the 65 to 70% of people that don't have kids, we have to be careful of their needs as well. So I know recurring is the best option, but when it comes to passing a referendum, I think non-recurring for 4 years is going to give the district an opportunity to get our budgetary issues in place. It's also going to give us the opportunity to see what the state legislature is going to do. Also, and I said this in a previous meeting, if we're going to be asking households to take a look at their overall budgets and make concessions to support higher property taxes, not only for the district, but also for the village, I think it's really important that the school district does that as well. I asked Jeff and Aaron to send me a breakdown of all of our expenses and revenues over the last 12 years, so thank you so much for that. I went through it, had a meeting with Aaron, highlighted a bunch of stuff. I still have a lot of questions. But that being said, as a district, we need to be able to make cuts and increase revenues that is going to bring that option 2 number up to the option 3 benefits. So just based off some simple math, we're looking at $150,000 year 1 cut or additional revenues, year 2, $300,000, year 4, $475,000, or year 3, $475,000, year 4, $600,000 if we did a 4-year referendum. So we all have to work together to make sure we can pass a referendum. So I know that was kind of a long drawn out thing. So just to kind of bring it all together, I personally love option 3. I think option 2 is going to get us across that goal line, and then the district needs to look at increasing revenues or making additional cuts to bring us the benefit of option 3 of making sure that we can compensate our staff and teachers near that Dane County average. The recurring, the non-recurring, that's going to be a question that I don't have the best answer for, but if I was a slightly less educated voter and I saw non-recurring on a ballot, I think I might be more inclined to vote yes. Love, Megan.
Okay, thank you. Lot of stuff. A lot of numbers being thrown about. And it probably would be easier if this was all about math, all about the numbers. But it has become apparent, and it continues to be apparent, that there's a lot of emotion that goes into a decision like this. If you've had kids previously in the district and currently have grandkids in the district, you're going to feel some sort of way about our school district. Not to say that those that do not have a connection to the district currently have any less passion toward the quality of education that we've really become accustomed to. This is a very, very young school district. You've got to remember, this school district is only about 50 years old, 51 years old, something like that. So, and I've lived here that whole time. I doubt that anyone here has lived in McFarland longer than I have. So I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen that school board meeting back, I think it was probably in the 80s or 90s, that there was a proposal on the table to do away with all athletics. Well, they had to use the gym for that next school board meeting. And it became very apparent that there was a lot of emotion involved in the cuts that were maybe needing to be made. Then you have to weigh those cuts against the atmosphere in the district. We typically have a very high morale district, very enthusiastic, very successful. Back in my day, we had a drama program that was the best in the state, bar none, without a doubt. Kids were beating the doors down to participate in these one-act plays and our theater program. Historically, our athletics has been very, very good. And for a school of this size, that's quite an accomplishment. But we have a decision to make that involves everyone in the community, and we're trying to get information that is as clear and concise as possible so that folks can make an educated vote when they do go to the polls. And I would certainly encourage everyone that's eligible to go to the polls. I would love to be able to count on help from the state government. But historically, at least since 2010, when I started on the board, it's apparent that, at least in that decade and a half or so, that public education wasn't their number one priority. That may change. There's been some positive things that have occurred in the last few months that, if they come to fruition, would be a great help. Now, correct me if I'm mistaken, but any additional monies we get from the state will go directly to tax relief as opposed to money coming to the school district.
If it is state aid.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts. I know we have to keep a great eye on the fund balance. This year, I believe we received between $400,000 and $450,000 I lost my place here, I'm sorry. And we talk about the dollar amounts. the dollar amounts aren't significantly different enough from one option to the next, where I don't believe it makes any sense to consider option one any longer. I just think it's a fiscally irresponsible thing to do. And every fiber of a school board member knows that the number one responsibility is to be responsible stewards of the finances within the district. So to ask for something that it has really been determined is fiscally irresponsible would be foolhardy. I could live with either option 2 or option 3. I think we need to do it on a recurring basis. And I think with further education, it will become apparent that option 3, recurring for 3 or 4 years, is the most fiscally responsible decision we can make. The question is, can we pass that referendum? If I had a crystal ball, I could say it would, but frankly, the result of the April referendum surprised me. As someone who's been here, mostly my entire life, McFarland has always passed referendums, and shame on me. I thought, we'd just put it out there and tell the folks this is what we need to stay the way we are, and they'd go ahead and tell us to go ahead and do that. Well, that did not happen. This was not a close loss, and we needed and still need to do a lot of work in order to provide all those voters that want or need further information, that they can get that. We're not going to, the reason that this is so urgent here tonight is that our deadline for getting a question on the ballot is August 27th. So we're up against it in terms of getting a question on the ballot. We do still have a couple of months to continue to communicate with the community, to continue to make sure that we're making responsible decisions. We just have a big decision to make in the next 4 or 5 days. So, if we're looking for recommendations, at least what from I heard tonight, it makes sense to eliminate option 1, consider option 2, consider option 3. I believe they should be recurring for either 3 or 4 years. I think that would best suit the needs of our district. Making the cuts that have been made already was extremely difficult. Those are tough emotional decisions. Every decision you make affects somebody's life, affects their family's life. So these things aren't taken lightly. I'm hoping that we get some help from the legislature. I'm hoping that we can convey all the information that's necessary to educate our voting public, and we understand that in some cases, any increase in property taxes is too much. There are folks that simply can't afford it. And that doesn't make them any more or less supportive of the school district. So what we need to do is educate those that are on the fence, those reluctant yeses, those reluctant nos. We need to bring them together, and that's what we'll work to do from here on out. I can't even explain how much work goes into a second referendum after a failed first referendum. This is really hard. It is really hard because we all understand that our decisions affect families. That's what makes it difficult. But I'm confident in this board and in our administration that we'll get something figured out that we can pass. I think it needs to be option 2 or 3. I think it needs to be recurring. I think it needs to be for 3 or 4 years. Now, that obviously leaves some wiggle room, but the optimal for the school district would be a 4-year recurring option 3. I could live with option 2, 4-year recurring. It's where I feel like most of the information that we're getting leans that way. Angie? Megan? Did you have something?
Yeah, my processing brain has caught up. And so if you're done, I can kind of share where I think I'm at with the numbers like you all did. I think I agree, option 1 should be off the table. Option 2 or 3, I have to apologize, my family's playing games in the other room, so if you can hear them, my apologies. So option 2 or 3, agree. I tend to be a very risk-averse person. I want to know that what we choose tonight is going to pass. But I'm not going to know that. So what I do know is that we have a very organized group of community members who have already started organizing Spartan Forward, and they are ready and already activating to advocate for whatever we choose. I think if we are going to go off of what, or depart from what the referendum engagement group has recommended, like you said, Craig, we have a lot of work left to do, and it's really going to be about activating and educating and advocating, and making sure that if we depart from those, we are boots on the ground, triple time what we've done already. And I do think that we can do that. I think we have all the partners in place to be able to do that. So I do think option 2 or 3, I would fully support option 2 for 3 or 4 years recurring. I think we could get that done. Option 3 for 3 years, recurring or like non-recurring, maybe recurring. There is no other more responsible choice than recurring for the school district, unless it's the option that doesn't pass, then it's horrible. But so that's where I'm at.
Thank you very much. Well, and I'll just say, just close with one more thing. It's something that I said at our last school board meeting, but I think it bears repeating, and it's I've witnessed it. Families move here to McFarland, and a significant part of the reason they do is because of the school districts. And I have just an overwhelming fear that failure of another referendum will, ironically, will have families moving away from McFarland because of the school district. And that would be unthinkable to a 1971 graduate of McFarland with 2 kids that graduated in 03 and 04, and a bunch of nieces and nephews, and 3 more still in the school district. The grandfather part of me struggles with that emotional part of this decision. So, and I know I'm not the only one for sure, so thank you for your patience and time, and thank you everyone who's come to the meetings, participated in the referendum engagement group, and has engaged. That's all we can ask as a board, is to have community engagement. So that's all I have, but we have a couple of other.
I think
we should engage in some conversation.
Okay.
yeah.
For example, if we went with option 2, recurring for 2 years, Jeff, what would that mean for next year? How many more cuts would that take, and how many more cuts in the budget would it take?
For option 2?
For option 2,
Option 2 doesn't have any more cuts.
No more cuts.
no, regardless,
No staff cuts.
no staff
You guys
cuts.
have actually cut off option 1, which has more problems.
Right. I was talking about option 2.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Can I just double check on that? I want to help us move forward.
Yes,
So what I
please.
heard is we've taken option 1 off the table.
Yeah.
It seems like the board has consensus about that. I just want to acknowledge that, so we can at least start to funnel down a little bit.
I would
Yeah.
say yes.
So option 2 and 3, neither of which have additional cuts. Keep in mind, all of these models were based on $1.2 million in cuts we had made at that point. We've made an additional $300,000 in cuts since that time. And so as staff leave,
But that is helping our declining enrollment
Yes.
situation.
so the declining enrollment is a challenge that we have. Now, could that change over time? We plan on coming to you in January and saying, let's open more open enrollment seats. Let's advertise those. Let's try to, fill our classrooms to the target levels, okay? Not over, but fill them to the target levels to maximize our resources, bring in additional revenues. But neither of the options now that are left on the table would involve any additional cuts beyond what has already been made.
What's the likelihood of gaining back the $1.5 million in combination of staff and budget cuts somewhere down the line?
All of it? I don't, it's unlikely.
Unlikely to what?
That-
Unless, can I answer that?
Yeah.
Unless you went back to the April 2nd referendum,
Mm-hmm.
you're not bringing those back.
I understand that, so if we ever have the intention of bringing them back, how do we do it? And when do we do it?
You'd have to.
You'd have to
You'd
have
have to
a
ask.
higher amount than option 3.
So basically, we're gonna be $300, or $1.5 million less than what it was this past year. Combination of number of staffing positions and cuts like 10% across each campus. See, to me, that's already significant. And what the community told us is that was too expensive and the recurring was too long. Already, under option 3, we've addressed both of those concerns.
Correct. Correct. Now, I think, getting to what Megan Chapman's thinking, because I can read her mind, wants to acknowledge that there are, we can always be looking at non-staff cuts that we could use that could result in being able to bring back some positions. Is that what you were thinking? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Good job.
I heard you kind of start to say that a little bit, because I think that's important to make, but it's a dollar amount. The other thing that, there's unknowns that happen, and so as much as we'd like to build a budget upon best guesses, we don't. We're conservative. So right now, our WEVA revenue is $1.4 million. Okay, that's what we budget for. That's part of our operational budget. No other district in the state of Wisconsin receives $1.4 million because they host Wisconsin Virtual School. If their enrollment increases, our revenue increases. If they went to another district, we would be having to account for that money. So those are some unpredictable things, but it could be that as time goes on, you're able to oh, we have additional revenue here, so you know what? We can actually account for that, you know, within our budget and do some other things, whether it's staffing, salary increases, or whatever the case may be.
I'll make two more comments. Yeah, we hope that the state changes its funding formula. Hope doesn't move us forward, though. You know, just like we talked about, there's no promises. Secondly, 39% of the voted yes for the referendum. That means we have to garner maybe another 11% plus? Correct. How insurmountable is that? I think it's doable with some of the things that we're talking about as far as hitting the road between now and November for a referendum.
I have one question about the survey, and we've already talked about this. I apologize.
Bruce,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it hasn't ended.
Yeah.
That's all right. Go ahead, Megan, you were started. I'll finish. I'll follow up. Why don't you give your point?
How many of the responses were collected from the email outreach versus the mailer outreach? Do we know?
Well, we don't know because the mailer also included the option to complete it virtually.
Okay.
So, but the vast majority of people completed it online
Okay.
as opposed to mail-in.
Because as I'm looking at the number of respondents from the survey versus how I feel how a presidential election and the number of people that vote, that voter turnout is, are we missing a certain number of people that are going to vote in the presidential election in November who didn't complete the survey? Because
Or who didn't vote in April.
exactly, that's just me.
That's not just you.
Okay.
I mean, other people have shared that
Okay.
same wondering.
Okay. Sorry, Bruce.
That's all right. You can hear me. Yes? You can't hear me? Oh, no.
I can hear you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, thank you.
I wanted to respond to one of the comments that, Tom, you were making. It's why I think you've got to go to a reoccurring. If you want to try to recoup those positions, and at some point, you know, hopefully we can, because I don't think they were wasteful in any way. I think you have to have, you've got to raise our revenue cap, and that's the only way you can do that is through a reoccurring referendum. There was a comment that said, you know, I just wanted to make a comment that I don't think the school district can do much to change what we're already doing. It's what's difficult in public education is that really all of our funding is in the hands of really the state legislature. So that's why, again, I feel like it's not being irresponsible to go a 2 or even, you know, I guess I could definitely go for 3 as well, but even a 2-year referendum recurring raises our revenue cap, but at the same time, it allows us to then reassess. And I think that's got to be part of the educational piece that we go to the public. We need to let them know that. That's it. Thanks.
So you're saying 2-year, Bruce?
I said 2 or 3, either one. I think we can get by with the 2 because I think if it turns out the situation hasn't changed, I think it's pretty easy to go to the public and say, look, this is what we warned you would happen. If the state doesn't get it together, then we're going to have to go for longer. But in the meantime, you've at least raised the revenue cap so that we don't have to start from square one where we're at right now. And I think that's the lift that would be just, I don't see how you could do that. And in some ways, the longer it goes as a non-recurring, the bigger that lift is going to be when you go back for another, and it's inevitable, you're going to have to go back. To me, the reoccurring allows you to raise that revenue cap. And again, as far as the public is concerned, I think what they're mostly going to see is this bottom line. They look at their taxes. They're not going to differentiate between, oh, my school spending is this much in the village. They see a bottom line. And I think, again, we have certain things going in our favor, like the state aid. Again, yes, it doesn't give the school more money, but it does give property tax relief, which from the bottom line to the people go like, oh, this is good. It's $100 less than what I was going to be getting otherwise. I think I think we got to take advantage of that.
I think my fear with going 2 years is that come November, we're already 3 months into year one. And so only having essentially another year of guaranteed additional funds, that just makes me nervous. So I think,
agree.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I feel like we should take 2 years off the table also. Especially, it sounds like there is more support among the 5 of us for recurring potentially. If I'm hearing people correctly, so maybe, 3 years recurring instead of 3 or 4 non-recurring. But I do think we should take 2 years off the table.
My only comment about that would be, having taken part in the community referendum engagement committee and being involved, I don't think we were ever talking about a reoccurring. I think it's something that we've become ourselves more educated on. And I think we ourselves are beginning to realize, again, we were blessed.
We lost you, Bruce. Bruce feels like we're blessed, and then he did a mic drop there.
Well, there we go.
And I feel
Yeah.
Signals over Minnesota are getting a little.
Yeah. Okay. Bruce, you're coming in and out for us here, friend.
all right, I'm gonna try one more time.
Okay,
I feel we have been blessed and educated by Al Rundy, who has just an amazing position in working in the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. I know he's embarrassed, but the truth of the matter is, we have learned that we may have to go to a recurring. And to me, that is a change in what the Community Referendum Engagement Committee had. So some of those people have said, I think we can go along with a 3-year option 2, may now have different feelings about it. And that's where I start going like, maybe we need to go and hold back a little bit.
Live with taking 2 years off the table.
I can go 2 or 3 years. If it's 3, I can probably live with that. Did you hear that?
Yeah, because I think you're the sole holdout on 2 years, so I think
No,
if you're willing to be flexible, then we can.
I can be flexible.
all right.
So we've got option 1 and 2 year off the table.
We're moving in the right direction.
Go team.
Does anyone have anything else that they would like to talk about? I have a couple of additional comments here.
Yeah, I think we're still rolling here. I'd like to. I mean, you're the bosses, but
We do that.
no, because once you do, we're done.
Okay.
Headphones died, so she's just changing her settings so she could hear.
So I think we're back to 3 or 4 years, but it seems like the recurring, non-recurring is a place that we're getting closer to maybe having some consensus. I know Megan Chapman was feeling non-recurring, and then Megan Fessler was, had recurring in option 2, but maybe option 3, non-recurring, recurring.
Okay, so since I was the non-recurring person that was a little bit more vocal about it, personally for me, I would love to see recurring. But I wrote down a question that I keep asking myself. Are we willing to risk not passing the referendum by going recurring versus non-recurring?
That's the question, yeah.
That is the question. So we have all been involved in the referendum conversation, at least for me, since April, right? Y'all have been dealing with this for much longer, and we are highly tuned in to all of the logistics, the semantics of what the referendum means, what recurring means, what non-recurring means. That being said, we are a very small percentage of this community that is this dialed in. And we can have all the listening sessions, we can have all the office hours, we can go door to door. But if we are still losing that point of saying, hey, we want to help the community by having this continue on after year 4, like, I don't want to be afraid, but I am nervous. And I'll just put it that way. Like, Al, Mama loves the state, I love the state legislation, I love everything you do, and I totally appreciate everything you've brought to the table. I just have so many concerns that we're not going to pass it because people are so afraid of that recurring factor.
But on the other hand, Megan.
Wait just one moment, Bruce Fisher's raising.
All right, I'm gonna ask this lady. Craig, just give me a thumbs up as long as you can hear me. As soon as you can't, just put your thumbs down. Okay. Megan, I strongly would say the reoccurring for 2 years is better than a non-recurring for 4 years or even 3 years. A 2-year recurring raises our revenue cap. And that to me is so important. I'm willing to say at the end of 2 years, and you can say it's 1.75 because we've already started, the biennial budget. But the truth of the matter is, we will know at the end of that if we're going to have to go back to referendum again. But luckily, it turns out we have raised the revenue cap and we don't have to go through that entire lifting process all over again. That is my only reason why I would say I'm not necessarily opposed to a 2-year. I think 3 years is fine. This is for Aaron. I do not think we should go to option number 3 because I think there are people on that committee, that community referendum engagement committee, who really, I think, will end up, they will also go out and hit the pavement and tell everyone that, you know what, they used us, they didn't listen to us, and it went there. And I don't think the difference, you answered Tom very clearly, there are no further cuts. Yes, they're not going to get the pay raise that we would have liked them to get, but I don't think that's something that we have to live with necessarily that long. I think it's something we can revisit. But the thing that really scares me more than anything is that if we go to number 3, you're going to have an engaged group of number 3, an engaged group of people from that community referendum engagement committee who are going to go out there and organize and just really try to rattle the public and say, see, we told you they weren't going to listen to us. That's only my comment. I feel like in some ways we do give them our word in a way that we could live with that. And they themselves are the ones who said, why would you go for number 1 for 4 years when it turns out it's cheaper to go for option number 2 for 3 years? But we never talked about a recurring at that point. And I think recurring is extremely important. Thank you.
Craig, we have Tom Mooney and then we have Megan Fessler after.
Thank you.
Yeah, but even with a 2-year recurring, there's no guarantee that that's going to pass. And I guess we are being tried, let's take a look at it a different way. If we move ahead, regardless of what referendum we pass, it'll be good for the taxpayer, it'll be good for homeowners, property values, it'll be good for the tax base. So I agree, Bruce, we can't afford another failed referendum. On the other hand, after 2 years, people are still going to say, we just had the referendum. Yeah, a year and a half earlier. Why didn't you just tell us how much it was going to be for 3 years out? So, yeah, it is a balancing act. I certainly agree. But again, I just feel that with the efforts that we're making, the level of understanding, we have answered their 2 questions. It was too much, and it was out too long. We have addressed those questions in addition to other things. We can show the community that we have addressed those 2 things.
Can I just get some facts in? Yeah. So just something to consider, Bruce, about a 2-year, is it really does put you into a bind with the election cycle. That if you're in a 2-year While there is a general election in November of 2025, it's not a election that has anything of significance. Your November of 2026, which would put you into a 3-year, would put you into a gubernatorial election, which would allow you to be in your 3rd year and planning for, that 4th year if something comes off of a 3-year plan. So I think it's just, we should be mindful of the election dates of the 2025 schedule and the 2026 when planning, whether it's a 2-year or 3-year. I think you're putting yourself in real danger on a 2-year with the election cycles.
Your point is well taken, and I just want to say that that's why I would go for a 2 or 3, and I would be able to live with a 3-year, as I said. So that would be probably my option. But I tend to feel option number 2 as opposed to option number 3.
One of the things you said, Bruce, I just want to acknowledge, you said if you did a 2-year, if you had to go back for a referendum, I just want to be crystal clear, we would have to go back for a referendum. That there's no chance that we would not have to go back for a referendum, even if it's recurring.
Point out or ask was that if we did a 2-year at option 2 or option 3, we would then hit another fiscal cliff, even if it's recurring, right?
Yeah, we'd still have a gap.
Right. After year 2.
It also doesn't allow you to plan out 2 of our largest expenses, salaries and benefits.
So there's no stability to the staff.
One other thing I'd like to point out is that if we did go with a shorter term, you might deal with a lot of what I like to call is election overload, where we start losing people's attention because we've been talking to them for so long about similar situations. So 3 or 4 years, we talk to them for a very concise amount of time. We get our message across. We gain confidence in our community members. And when we gain confidence, they're going to want to work for the district because we're working for them.
Bruce?
Yeah, I think those points are all well taken, and I really wanted to acknowledge what Jeff Mahoney, you said. I think, Jeff, you're the one who understands that the most, and I think that's a very valid point, particularly about our healthcare benefits. And obviously the salaries for the teachers and stuff like that for staff. So I acknowledge. That's why I think, personally, 3, I think 4 is a little bit of a stretch. That's where I would get nervous. I think you'd have a hard time selling that, or a harder time selling that. I think 3 years we could probably do. Again, it's going to come on bottom line.
Is the board feeling, as I look at, I'm kind of taking notes here as we go along, it seems like there's a sense that maybe recurring for 3 years versus a non-recurring for maybe 4 years. Kind of like that year, if you're going to go recurring, maybe make it less time. I'm not telling you to think that, but this is what I thought I was kind of hearing in your comments. But I could be off. So that would, I guess I babbled a little bit, but it's late. So I'm thinking of, are you saying recurring 3 years versus recurring 4 years?
Option 2.
I didn't throw that in there yet, but yes.
I think that's what he said.
But option 2 or 3, but I'm trying to get that recurring and years.
Yes, what I heard was that people are open for a 2 or 3 year recurring. And some people.
I think we should stop talking about option 2. Or 2 years. I just think we should, because I think it's confusing people. Because I'm getting confused and I'm sucking down Mountain Dew Zero. So if I'm confused off that much caffeine, it's a problem. So I think, sorry, Bruce. But yeah, I just think we should stop talking about 2 years.
Take 2 years off the table.
Take 2 years off the table because when push comes to shove, it's not really 2 years, it's a year and a half, and then we're starting the referendum process all over again.
Yeah, Bruce is good with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the
Which
last
isn't
one.
free, by the way?
Yeah.
as we were tabulating the numbers. It's not free to do a campaign for a referendum.
And it's exhausting, y'all. Like, and it's such a good exhaustion, but
Use of our resources.
Yeah, that's a good way to, that's a better way of putting it.
It's not a good use of our resources when we're already doing it right now for a second time already in a year.
Okay, so getting back, okay, so we're just talking about 3 or 4 years, recurring, non-recurring, right? Maybe just focus on those two things. It seemed like there was a play between shorter time recurring or maybe longer time non-recurring. Is that what you were saying? Board members?
I wasn't saying that. I was saying
You were just
a
saying
3-year recurring.
3 years. You said that, Tom, you said 3 years.
3-year recurring, yes.
Yeah, so your logic
what-
of fewer years, yeah. Go ahead, Megan, sorry.
No, that's okay. I think, let me just quick go back to the recommendations. So I guess mine was 3 years recurring. Option 2 or 3.
All right. So both, well, so far, we could do, we're all at 3-year recurring. Megan Chapman?
I don't know.
And you don't have to make a decision tonight, you know, I'm just trying to kind of whittle it down. And even if you go into Monday with a couple of different options, that's fine. You know, one could be recurring, one could be non-recurring, I'm just trying to see where there is, you can tell what I'm doing.
I would rather
I'm trying to
that
take
didn't
things
happen.
off the plate for discussion. Well, because you're basically making a vote tonight, so it's fine to have.
I think we should be able to get to consensus on at least the number of years and recurring or non-recurring. And it looks to me like we're headed a direction of what is palatable is a three-year recurring, either option 2 or 3.
So I think for me, and I think this is why 4 years is sticking out to me, is because it follows the pattern of our state legislature and how that could possibly turn in the next 4 years versus 3, if that makes sense. You understand what I'm saying? But regardless, we are one team, one dream, and I think it's important that we all come together as a collective front. So if we are looking at 3 years recurring or 4 years non-recurring, I'm on board.
That's what, I mean, I appreciate your point about the legislature and the timing of that. If we're doing a 3-year and if something significantly changes with the legislature in the next 3 or 4 years, and something, like they're giving more money without it being state aid or increasing revenue caps or whatever powers they may have, we can always ask for less. We can always levy less than our revenue cap, right?
Yep.
And I think that's an important message to get out there also. Whatever option we go with, that if there's greater state funding, that will impact what we're asking for.
I think, Jeff has been saying this all along, that this is a district that never taxed to the max. So being conservative, you're gonna ask for X amount. Maybe worst case scenario or X amount, but if it turns out that it's more of a positive result, I think you don't have to tax on the initial amount, do you?
No.
No, the school community at the annual meeting, as residents, not board members, are in control of advocating up to the revenue limit that is either in place or the revenue limit that is in place plus any recurring referendum. So there's a lot of opportunity for the community to be engaged even after hopefully a successful something referendum over the next several years.
It, I would say the catch is that the public has to believe that we would do that. And there is a distrust of government that is, only growing in the last few years. So it's almost like.
You're right.
I don't think you're gonna convince a ton of people that we would do that. So if we did it, then we just have to make sure to tell them we did.
That's
I
fine.
don't think you're gonna sell it on that.
I think the other thing that we learned from the feedback, and then also just in terms of the survey and everything we've done with the community engagement focus, is that, sorry, there's a really loud airplane going over, that we need to engage the community that does not have kids in the district a lot more. I mean, it's been on our goal as a board, but I think we've really learned that through this. And so our efforts beyond November are going to have to really be increased and even more important, so that the community is understanding the value that we bring to them, even if they don't have kids in the district. And I think that will set us up for success in anything that we need to do in the future with referendums. And that was a huge thing for me to learn, that really needs to be even more of a higher priority than I thought it needed to be. And so I think that might help with that trust building too. Like you were saying, Aaron, like they would maybe start to learn to trust that we're gonna say what we're gonna do, basically.
So if I can chime in real quick. Part of the reason I keep talking about the non-recurring piece is because as I've been talking to people in the community that don't have kids, that has been a very big talking point for them, is the non-recurring piece. And the other thing with the non-recurring versus recurring is the village spending and what's going on there. And that's a tough pill to swallow, because we love our village and we love our district, and all those things come at a price. Okay, now Bruce is on.
Sorry, yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I'll watch for Craig. Let me know. In answer to your, or in response to your statement, Aaron, I believe the trust actually, I'm not quite as jaded as what you say. I think by going with option number 2, we're telling the public, look, we think number 3 would be better. We even think fiscally it might make more sense. We know that it would be more beneficial for our children, but we also hear what you said and what you told us, and you particularly in that community referendum engagement committee. I think we have to realize that many of those people were leaders in their respective little groups, and they are going to be the people who are going to sell it. They're going to say, look, yes, they're asking for a recurring. We kind of understand now where that's coming from, and that's going to be our job as well. But at the same time, they're going to say, we trust these people. And in response to Megan Chapman, your last comment, the truth of the matter is the village has heard. The village is very aware of what is been spoken now. And you can look at it being unfortunate. Why didn't they go to these meetings beforehand? But the truth is they have kind of slowed down. And I think that's going to give the public a sense of hope that we, the elected leaders, are listening to what the public is saying. So that's, again, it'd be why I would go for the option number 2 versus number 3. So anyway, thanks.
Anyone else here have anything additional?
The only other thing I would say is that we talked about salaries, we've talked about the different options, we talked about the taxes. We have to loop it around to the kids again. What is it that the kids need and want, but more importantly, need? And we talked about, you know, the students that are more marginal might be impacted more if we can't move ahead with this. But I would argue even our other students would be impacted, and maybe our gifted and talented students would be impacted even more so. Because we
They
feel
already are.
they can handle it on their own. And they don't deserve to handle it on their own.
I'm nervous, and I know it's 9:30, but.
No, that doesn't.
But we're gonna walk into Monday night still, I mean, we've got a couple things off the table, but I'd like to kind of push the board to continue working a little bit here. You know, what I'm seeing right now, at least at some point, somebody said that we had sort of maybe a 3-year recurring and maybe a 4-year non-recurring on the table. I don't know if that's still the case. And we're still talking about option 2 or 3. I'd like to push us to see if we can narrow it down to at least 2 options.
I like the idea of making proposals. Then people can react to it. And I would propose that we move forward with the 3-year, option 3, 3-year recurring.
Okay.
And respond to that, I guess.
Megan Dessler? Where are you?
Go ahead. I am, I am leaning towards option 2, 3-year recurring. I could see where option 3, 3-year recurring. Like if it were up to me, those would be the 2 options I would put out tonight and look for feedback from the community. But I hear what you're saying about the non-recurring, Megan. It is feedback we've been hearing. It's a risk, but I think we have a lot going in our corner that we could get people there.
Megan Chapman.
I will say option 2, 4-year, non-recurring. Because that way it ties in line with the next presidential election. And obviously that increased voter turnout. If we would have to do something again. And then option 2, 3-year recurring. But that first choice is my number 1 pick.
So what was your first choice?
Option 2, 4-year non-recurring. Actually, I'll say option 2 or 3 for either of those.
So option 2 or 3, 4-year non-recurring, or option 2 or 3, 3-year recurring.
Yes, because as we look at the per year breakdown between option 2 and option 3 and what we get for it without the district having to make any changes on fixed costs and whatnot, it's well worth that extra investment, in my opinion.
Okay.
Bruce has a question.
Bruce?
I think I've made it pretty clear. I would go for option 2 for a 3-year recurring. The one thing I would do,
Thumbs down, Bruce. I don't think we can hear you.
Thumbs down.
And the thing is, if his Wi-Fi is frozen, he can't even see the
try
thumbs
to,
down.
Oh, Bruce.
Can you put it in the chat and one of us read it verbatim? Although those chat is available right now.
Okay.
Coming back? Coming back. All right, good. I'm going to option 2, 3-year reoccurring. I just think you should make the people who are supporting the yes people, I would let them know that we will try to get an associate principal at Wabisa Intermediate School. I think that is giving both sides what they want. It's close to number 3. It's also telling the people who are the no voters who we've kind of persuaded that we're hearing what they have to say as well. I think it's that sweet spot personally.
I think we can identify a position and say we're going to, support this one position when multiple positions have been cut already.
That would be your action item on Monday night.
Right, but
Your action item is about a resolution for a November election.
right.
Yep.
Right.
That's
But that is the one that's been pointed out by people, numerous people. That's one thing that they really have major reservations on. And I think, and those are yes people.
Okay.
Do you feel like that might change a yes vote to a no?
I hope not. It also makes me concerned about people taking their kids out of the district.
Us about making a referendum contingent upon an
No, I
administrative
agree with
position.
that. I agree with
I
that. You
don't
can't
think
make it
that's-
contingent on it. That's why it's 2-year, 3-year recurring. Option 2, sorry, 3 years recurring. That's my bottom line.
Yes. I think I'm all that's left then.
Bring it home, Craig.
Okay. Well, I want to repeat one thing that during my comments, I believe I lost my train of thought, but I think it's important. When talking about fund balance, our revenue this last year or this year on the $13.6 million in the fund balance was either $405,000 or $450,000. Now, if we get down to at or near that 10.6 million in our fund balance, that will cut that revenue gained in half. So the less that we have to remove from the fund balance, the better fiscally. I think after obviously much thought about this and listening tonight, I think I would like to see us do an option 3-year recurring. I think we have enough time left to educate the community to such a degree that the most fiscally responsible decision that this board can make, putting aside will it pass or not, is a 3-year option 3-year recurring. Can we pass that? Don't have a crystal ball. I don't know, but I am convinced that option 3-year recurring answers the questions the community had regarding length of time and amount, while stopping the cuts is critically important. I think keeping our teachers' salary, and we're not even asking to bring them up to equal with everyone else. What we're asking for brings them up into the neighborhood of all these other districts. If we lose people, the people we're going to lose will be the veteran, tough to hire, tough to retain, the high-end math folks, the special education folks, all of those kinds of things. So feet to the fire, option 3-year recurring. Anybody have anything else?
Does that help you, Aaron?
Aaron, Jeff?
Well, I think, yeah, yeah, so I think, a theme is option 2 or 3, 3-year recurring. Right, that was, there were different perspectives on that, but that was a 3. I think Megan Chapman brought up the non-recurring, so I'm not sure if that's still on the table or not.
I'm just putting this, I'm just so afraid it's not gonna pass. I'm so afraid. And then we are in a really, really, really bad spot. And if we think about all the teachers and the staff we're gonna have to let go, then as we try to hire them in future years, the cost associated with that, I'm just so afraid.
None of us can know.
I know.
None of us can know. There are variables in front of us that could maybe shift positions a little bit, but I can't imagine anything so significant happening the remainder of this year that I just want to make sure. I do believe passing any referendum is better than passing no referendum. I think we all can agree on that.
Especially now that you've taken one off the table.
Right. So now we have to think about what's best for the kids. What's best for the kids is not to lose any more teachers or staff. But I also think if we need to go out and educate the public or the community on teachers' salaries or administrators' salaries, I think we have to make a commitment to our teachers to try to at least get them in the neighborhood of our neighbors. I, of course, share Megan's concern about not passing a referendum. That would be, in my view, catastrophic for the district. And I'm just hoping that that feeling can be moved over into the community about how critical these teaching positions are. It's easy to sit back and say, well, just make cuts, just like we do at home. You make cuts. Well, it's not like home, one thing. Our school financing is very different and very difficult.
I think this is what I'm hearing. Jeff and I are doing our best here. I think you have sort of 4 options that you're talking about, right? You have option 2, 3-year recurring. You have option 3, 3-year recurring. You have option 2, 4-year non-recurring. You have option 3, 4-year non-recurring. So basically 2 or 3 for 3 years recurring, 2 or 3 for 4 years non-recurring. That seems to be where we are right now.
Do we as a board want to move? I'm sorry?
Ms. Fessler?
Oh, go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, I think that kind of also feels like 2 options to me. Is that enough to leave it for tonight? Give us some time to think. Give the community some time to think. Allow for more feedback from the community, and then is that enough of a quote unquote decision to be able to move on to Monday night? Or do you feel like we need to narrow it down more, Aaron?
I will say I like where Megan's head is, because now that we've taken the funnel and we've slimmed it down quite a bit, we're still going to have more public comments tonight. We're going to have 4 days to engage the community before our next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
2 of those are a weekend.
people don't work on the weekends. I'm just kidding.
They don't pay any attention.
I think it would be irresponsible for us as a board to try to narrow this down even more without thinking about it because like we've all said, this is a very emotional choice, and as well as getting some community feedback.
Okay.
The only thing I want to share is that we know across the nation, there's a movement to decrease public education and improve private education. And we have to make sure that we have our ducks in a row to make sure that we can continue to provide a high-quality educational system to kids, the families, and the community, to keep McFarland as a thriving community. That's all I'll say about that.
I mean, we can come back with, you know, the 4 options for Monday. That's fine. I mean, we're closer than we were at 7. That's certainly fine. But if that's what the board, if that's where we're, you know, kind of ending, we do have a time for public comment. People have stuck around,
Well, here's one other thing.
you know.
Could we
tonight.
somehow find like a middle option between all of them?
I would entertain anyone that has.
I mean,
an
granted,
idea.
I mean, I'm just trying to say, like, we have option 2, we have option 3. Can we find that sweet spot between the two? I mean, there might not be enough time.
There's not a heck of a lot of difference between the two.
Yeah, I would be concerned that we've done so much education with the community that switching to something totally different would be confusing, and then it restarts the whole conversation. Well, I like the idea of trying to be creative about it, but it feels like then we're changing what people have already started to make decisions about or have started to really think about. And I don't know that we have enough time to really do the community outreach to be able to inform them about that.
Maybe another option to consider. Option 3, recurring the first 2 years, non-recurring the 3rd year.
Ooh, look at you go.
I don't think we can do that.
We already asked
Oh,
one
that's too bad.
question. We can only have one question on the ballot.
Oh.
And when you do a recurring and a non-recurring, you have to do 2 separate questions.
Oh.
You could choose to do a question in November and then choose to do a question in November. We can't go back in April for the second question or 3rd question.
And that would be even more confusing.
So, just a thought. Sitting back, hearing each of you, all 5 of you have in your wheelhouse option 2, recurring 3 years.
Correct.
That is correct.
I do not, but
You want option 3?
I want option
Yep.
3.
Okay.
And I was option 3 as well.
All right. But minimally, starting with number 2,
Yes.
Minimally, correct.
Yeah.
would be closer to a 3 for you. So I think, I'm not trying to, I think maybe if you were to come back with 3 things to discuss on Monday, which would be number 3, recurring 3 years, number 2, recurring 3 years, and likely maybe it's number 2, non-recurring 4 years, I think is where I heard Megan Chapman
I think we need
a
to
little
have a
bit.
non-recurring option.
So I think that was more of your theme, so you would have one that Tom has outlined that's more so that he's looking for. Megan, you're looking a little bit closer, I think, at number 2, non-recurring 4 years is kind of so I think you have your 3 options to discuss for Monday night.
Can we get that in an email? Because my notes are starting to lose their mind.
Yeah, did somebody, Bruce?
Yes. There's 2 things that people are worried about. They're worried about the reoccurring, non-reoccurring. Okay. They're also concerned about option 2, option 3. To me, the compromise, the sweet spot is option 2. Craig, you said it best. There isn't that much difference between them. Jeff, you answered Tom that there's no more cuts. There is a difference in teacher salary, but it's not even that significant. And again, it's possible we might be able to find some savings somewhere that we could work that in. The reoccurring to me is one that I just think that is the one I think we'd be fiscally irresponsible to do a non-recurring at this point, because you're going to go back and then you have to then make up all those years where you were doing the recurring just to go to the next referendum. I think you've got to go to a recurring. I think the public, the no votes are going to say, okay, they didn't take number 3. The yes votes are going to say, oh, darn, they didn't take number 3, but they go to reoccurring. I think you found the sweet spot. And that's what I think, Jeff,
And Bruce, what I was trying to get at is I think you have 3 items that even your community that's here this evening can reflect on. If you were to say number 3 and number 2 recurring, 3 years are 2 things to debate next Monday night. And also number 2, non-recurring, 4 years, I think brings in a theme that we've also heard this evening. I think if you have those 3 themes, it's something that our community here can reflect on. And you could maybe, it's not a vote to say that you could live with those themes. It would be, could your community comment on those 3 themes this evening if you all gave 5 thumbs up, no comments? Sorry.
I
being a
like
little
those
direct.
3 options.
Well, and the 3 options are fine.
Okay.
But I just don't know what could happen between now and Monday that would move me off of.
So I think the goal of how you had structured this meeting as your public meeting was to come up with a few options that as a group you could debate further on Monday evening, and now you have time for public comment that you had laid out.
If that's good with you guys, that's fine.
Well, I think that's the
Yeah.
structure you'd laid out.
Yeah,
But I also feel we could be here till 1 o'clock.
I'm
in the
okay with
morning,
that.
Trying to come up
Well,
with,
And that's okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure you're gonna do your best thinking between now and 1 o'clock.
exactly.
Well, I don't,
I might
But we
need
can
more
do
Mountain
great
Dew.
listening. We could do
I
great
think you
listening,
can do
right?
great listening at that point. I would be totally in favor of going forward with those 3 options to get any feedback from anyone who's willing to provide it, and move on to the public comment section tonight.
you okay with that, Tom?
Yep.
Megan?
I'm cool, yo.
All right, I've got
Skibbity Riz.
a couple, I've got one to read and one present to speak. I will read this one first. It's from Patrick Toohey. Good evening. I have been a social studies teacher and coach at McFarland High School for the past 9 years. The upcoming school year will be my 10th in the district. I am writing in support of the referendum, preferably option 2 or option 3. McFarland is a special place, and it's special largely because of this school district. It provides a wealth of opportunities to kids while still feeling like a community. If we fail to support the school district through one of these referendums, options 2 or 3, the consequences for the district and McFarland itself will be profound. McFarland will lose the ability to provide many of the opportunities it has for decades. It will lose people that helped provide those opportunities and made this place feel like a community. The district will slowly wither and become a lesser thing. I would hate to see fewer opportunities, larger class sizes, and less support in our schools. I believe that if the referendum fails to pass, McFarland will no longer be such a special place. That is why I fully support option 2 or option 3. Thank you, Patrick Toohey. And we have one present, Maya Thompson.
In addition to.
Okay.
And if others do want to speak at
Yep.
the end, you can. Yep, you can register.
Good evening. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for your time. It's been exhausting watching you guys, so I'm sure you guys are tired. My name is Maya Thompson. I went through the district K through 12, and I graduated in 2023, so pretty recent. I'm going to school right now to become an ESL teacher for elementary, along with being an athlete for cross country and track and field. And I also have a parent that is a teacher in the school district. She taught middle school and high school. Now, I could acknowledge many topics being a former student in the district, but I think all of us have one thing in common in this room, and that's that we have all been students before. And whether it was a long time ago or more recent, we've all had teachers that we really were able to connect with. Not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. And so for me, I'm just kind of speaking on behalf of being a former student in the district. I was able to connect with a lot of my teachers on an academic base and supporting me in reaching my goals in the classroom, along with having a lot of my teachers be coaches of mine in athletics and building those relationships outside of the classroom through sports, through clubs, through music. And so for me, it's just really important to acknowledge that teachers will have an effect on students and people even when we're way past school, and that overall teachers go into teaching for a reason. Teachers care about students, and they care about making students become the best person that they can be, and we students really take that to heart. And even though we have our moments where we may not always fully agree with our teachers, in the future we'll look back and we'll remember the teachers that really made a positive impact on us. And I'm sure a lot of students right now don't want to focus on losing teachers that they've had connections with throughout the years, and especially, like I mentioned before, having coaches and teachers that are part of clubs and other outside extracurricular activities. And so I guess my overall message is just the value of a relationship between a teacher and a student. It makes an impact in the moment and beyond that. And that one thing that I learned just being in school to become a teacher is that I don't think many people think about this, but approximately students are in school for 7 hours a day, 180 days a year for 12 plus years. And that's a long time to be building these connections with strangers at the start of the school year, for it to transform into the end of the school year of being someone that they can really trust and look up to. And so for me, I guess to conclude it is I feel that it is important to choose a referendum that properly funds our schools in order to create and sustain an excellent learning environment for students and to keep relationships between students, teachers, and teachers' peers as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maya. Lori Whitman.
Well, I definitely had not planned on speaking tonight, so I'll try to work through my little chicken scratches here. I'm thinking I'm a voice that maybe you don't usually hear at your meetings, perhaps. I moved to the district in 2017, so I'm relatively new here, non-staff, no kids or grandchildren in the district. But I spent 24 years supporting teachers and administrators in 180 school districts in Illinois through the Illinois State Board of Education. My mother was a high school teacher. My father was a high school principal. My son is a band teacher and now a college professor. So I have education in my blood. I value and support education. And that means it was through tears that for the first time in my life I voted no in April on an education referendum. I didn't have enough information. I didn't understand it well enough. I was scared of the numbers. The dollars scared me, and the village was scaring me. So it was some of the things I've already heard you, and I know you've heard it from a lot of other people, reasons for not voting for it. I did the survey, but I didn't make a choice because I still didn't feel like I had enough information. I went to the referendum meeting, and that completely changed my mind. It was a really valuable meeting, and at this point, I would say I would support option 3, and probably for the 3-year recurring. There's so little difference between 2 and 3, but you're going to get some benefit from 3. And I think you can sell it. I think what you figured out is that you just need to get out there and provide information. I think I heard you say earlier, a lot of people changed their minds. You impacted a lot of people positively at those referendum meetings. And I think that going forward between now and November, you can do the same thing. You have it figured out, and I think you can do it.
Thank you. Mike Madursky.
I don't know about you, she brought me the chair, so. Mike Madursky, you guys all know me, so I won't get into the background. Just a few comments. First of all, from whether it's option 2 or option 3, I'm a data guy. I look at data. The only data point that I have right now is 2 points: the failed referendum, and we have a survey. Now, some people are arguing the validity of the survey or whatever. That's fine, but that's the point that I have, is the survey. I know it's old information right now. We know things have changed, but the option 3 in that survey was a 40%, 60% non-pass. Now, do I think we've moved 10 points? I don't know. I don't. Option 2, 45% support. That feels a lot closer to me to 50.1 than 40. So that's where I stand in terms of option 2, recurring, non-recurring. I would encourage you to be recurring. Megan, I understand your thought. I was kind of in the same boat, quite frankly, of like, hey, if non-recurring pushes us over the edge, let's just do non-recurring and deal with it. But like you, and you mentioned the village, I didn't. I just want to put that on record. I don't know what the village taxes are going to look like in 4 years, and I would rather have a recurring situation than a non-recurring situation, not knowing what the future is. So to me, it's option 2, recurring. Would I like option 3? I do. I don't want to, my risk is you have to get it right this time. We have to pass, because otherwise now it's November, and then we're out. I think option 2 is more passable than option 3. But then having said that, and having heard her today, I said this in 2016, and man, I might get choked up on this. I believe this in 2016. I believe it today. This is not the McFarland School District. This is McFarland's school district. And there's a big difference in that statement. People come to this town because of the school district. People support the teachers, support the school district. I don't have kids in the school district anymore, but I love all these guys back here. Don't know half of them, quite frankly. But I'll support them with everything. But I want it, but all kidding aside, I want it to pass. We have to take emotion out of it, which, sorry, we do. We have to take emotion out of it. And taking the emotion out of it, you need something that passes. 2, recurring for 3 years. I think is it. Thank you guys. You guys did a great job, and you guys are awesome.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, guys.
Lisa Crane.
Just like the person before, I was not planning on being seen, so sorry, I look like a scrub. I was actually surprised how many people were watching last week. I came, my husband came, we talked, we hoped we were heard, but it was important to us. Education is something that's in our blood, it's what we've done. I don't think anyone in this room has ever been a teacher where they have been 3 FTE in a school year. I have. It sucks. And not only does it sucks for your kids. My child was in a class with 2 FTE this year and 1 teacher that was teaching them. He was doing a great job. I have nothing bad to say about him. I thank him for his work. Do you think my child got the same education as her peers? No. 2nd grade, she had a full year. Great teacher. Her 1st grade year, teacher had to leave halfway through. She had a revolving door. Kindergarten, COVID. 4K, COVID. It scares me at the idea of not passing a referendum, because when you talk about it not passing and you equate it to 35 FTE, that's what, roughly 35 FTE would be almost 9% of your staff, right? 9% of our staff could be cut if it doesn't pass. That says something even more, right? For me, option 3 is still the only option for me. And everyone that has come towards me, the only reason I know people are watching it, they're like, well, what's the difference? If it's only $100, then why aren't we doing it? I like Megan's idea of a 4-year non-recurring because it puts us in another presidential year. I would love option 3 recurring, even though I don't want to pay for it personally. I too was a no because I wasn't educated. But my kids need it, their teachers need it. It needs to happen. So if we're not going for recurring, I would love an option 3 4-year where we can come back in another presidential year and hopefully do whatever they need. Last week, you guys started talking about voter data, and we kind of asked a random question about, do we know how many showed up? I found out. The clerk was nice enough to send it to me. Dane County averaged 34% to the polls in the April elections. We hit 60%. In a presidential election, McFarland turns out 90 to 94% in favor of blue. We are fiscally liberal, and we tend to vote more liberal as well. In your April elections, you had a very, very lucrative referendum on the ballot, and you had the Republican primaries on there. In my opinion, and I am not qualified in any way, shape, or form to validate it, you've had the majority of your fiscally conservative people. You had your adamant no's. We came out in a snowstorm to say no because we didn't know better. You've got 30 to 34% of your voters unaccounted for. And then, after people were messaging me, I realized, referendum survey, I keep asking for more about it, and it doesn't relate. I realized sitting on the couch, I did our referendum survey. I looked at my husband. I asked him if he had done it. I know you'll all be shocked to know he didn't. And then I messaged, no joke, 48 friends. 48, so I'd have a nice even number, right? 41 had done the survey. Out of the 41, 1 household had each done the survey. I know you'll be shocked that the moms did all of the surveys in the other 40 homes. I was too. That's double the amount of voters. I happen to know that those are all yeses now, of which a bunch of them were no's because they asked me for advice. And I gave the wrong advice. I did, okay? And then when we bring it back to where I talk about my daughter's education, luckily, she's extremely smart. So she has managed to get by. She has friends that don't and have not. And I've been tutoring them on the side for free because their families help us, we help them. It's what we do, it's a community, right? But if they went for tutoring, let's say you have 10 hours of tutoring a month, $30 an hour for tutoring is what I found was the going rate right now. That's $300 a month. What are you gonna pay in the referendum So if we get rid of the staff, you're gonna have to figure out how to teach your kid, and most of us don't have the skill set to do it. You're gonna have to find the money in some way, shape, or form. And we have to find a way to get people on board to realize that. Thank you so much for your time, I appreciate
Lisa?
it.
Okay. That's the end of our edition.
I got one.
Oh, okay.
I'm not gonna, all right, wait, I need a timer. I can't possibly stand, can I? Is it possible I can stand? The camera doesn't work that way? No, I don't want to. All right, I just think better when I stand. All right, because I'm not gonna read anything. I'm just gonna talk. There's so much fear in this room. And a lot of you have identified that you're so risk averse, but I want to point out, I'm going to point out a few things. I just have like my chicken scratch too. Option 2 carries significant risk. If you're going to do option 2, you better hope you can retain your staff because you're not going to be able to compete with the near bottom pay in the county. You want insurance for that? Ask us to spend $26 extra a year. I don't know an insurance premium that's that low for anything, right? Like, you want to avoid risk, go from option 2 to option 3. That's one thing. I'm shaking. The staff, the staff story. I skipped it. I said I was going to skip it. I'm going to read it. You guys have to know this. I ran into a staff member today, and in our short conversation, I lightly asked, will you be, and it was such a ridiculous question to ask, but I said, and will you be back this fall? What a weird question to ask. And the staff member hesitated and said, I haven't decided yet. Now, maybe this is someone who already resigned and it's not public knowledge to me. I don't know the staff member personally, but 2 weeks before school starts, haven't decided yet? What are they waiting for? We're in a fragile place with our retention, and we can't suffer more blows to our morale. They're hanging on your decision on Monday. I mean, certainly not all of them, but families and staff are hanging on this decision, okay? Maybe even more than November. And then another thing, we have to understand these survey results because we are misunderstanding these survey results. Oh, what's the time? Okay, and this was the other half of my public comment, so I better go fast because I'm just going to tell you. All right, this is page 13 and a half that should be in school perceptions results, okay? We had page 13 that gave the results within each demographic, parents, staff, non-parent, non-staff, okay? Broken out in these stripes. Page 14, they give the weighted results, but they didn't show us the weighted results by individual item. They showed us the weighted results when they bucket the items. And it obscures an important fact about the survey results, even as outdated as they are already, which is this. Which item was the favorite according to the weighted survey results? That means, according to the survey, what is the community favorite? It's option 3. 40% preferred option 3. Do you know what the least favorite survey item at all was? The lowest percentage? It wasn't need more information, which was pretty low. It wasn't asking for something smaller. It was options 1 and 2. Options 1 and 2 each had 5% preference by the community. 5% of the community prefers option 1 and 5% prefers option 2, compared to 40% preferring option 3. That's remarkable. It's the most expensive option. Why would they choose that? Because they know the difference. Okay? Because they know the difference. And we're in McFarland. People are in McFarland because we know the difference. Please, trust us. Trust us to understand. Trust us to learn what we don't understand already over the next couple of months. Okay? And, it's one thing if asking us for a little bit more only gives you a little bit more. But if asking us for a little bit more gives you a whole lot, then please ask us for a little bit more. Be responsible with our money.
These are big dollars. I don't want to spend big money to not give our teachers a raise after all they went through with COVID, right? What an impassioned, oh boy. I have 30 seconds. Oh, I wanted to talk about 4 years. 4 years is important for retention. I'm just going to say, when a teacher knows that they have stability for the next 4 years, that feels far enough away that they can go, okay, here's where I am now. 3 years is, you can imagine 3 years a little bit. 4 years puts it out enough that families and staff can go, okay, well, I'll be here for now, and we'll just see how it goes. That's all. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Anyone else got anything? Bruce? Megan?
Lloyd Steiner would be very proud of us.
Snyder started the school district in 1962-ish, something like that, just decided we should have our own.
It's not exactly what Pauline Larson says, who's our neighbor for 5 years. Little scuttle out there. Would you like to make a motion to adjourn? I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second
Thank you,
that.
Tom. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, one and all. I can't say thank you enough. I can't say thank you enough for showing up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All righty, y'all.